Jamal walked into class, thinking it was just another Tuesday, until his teacher laughed and told him to solve something he'd never understand. The room erupted in cruel laughter, every eye drilling into him like a spotlight. But instead of breaking, Jamal stood, walked to the board, and what happened next left the entire school in stunned silence. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The air in Westbrook High's advanced calculus class carried its usual hum of low chatter and squeaking sneakers against the polished floor. Morning light slanted through tall windows, painting pale stripes across the whiteboard, where equations from yesterday still lingered half erased. Students filed in with backpacks slung over one shoulder, already weighed down by the unspoken competition that defined the class. Westbrook was a school where grades carried reputations, and reputations carried future. In the far corner sat Jamal Rivers, the only black student in the room. His presence was impossible not to notice, though most pretended not to. He kept his head low, his binder neat, his pen moving quietly across the page as though he was part of the furniture. Jamal had learned long ago that silence was a kind of shield. If he spoke too much, his voice would be questioned. If he spoke too little, he would be ignored. Either way, he stood out, so he settled for invisibility, or at least the closest thing to it he could manage. At the front, Mr. Chandler strode in with his usual brisk confidence. He was a man who wore his authority like a tailored suit, comfortable, undeniable. The students respected him, even liked him, for his dry humor and sharp explanations. He had a way of making calculus feel less intimidating for those who already believed they belonged in the room. For those who didn't, his jokes had an edge that cut deeper than most realized. Today, Chandler's eyes swept across the class before landing on Jamal. Something in his smile tightened. He picked up a marker, tapped it twice against the board, and said in a voice that carried too easily, "Rivers, why don't you show us how it's done today?" Heads turned. The room grew quiet, anticipation sharpening the air. Jamal blinked, startled. He never raised his hand unless he was absolutely sure, and Chandler had never called on him like this before. The teacher turned back to the board and scribbled a problem across the surface, a complex derivative tangled with trigonometric functions. It wasn't just difficult, it was deliberately cruel, far beyond the level they had been working on. The chalk squealed against the board as the symbols took shape, an equation that even some of the top students in the room knew would take several steps to untangle. Chandler capped the marker with a smirk and stepped aside, gesturing toward the board as if inviting Jamal into an arena. "Come on," Chandler said, his voice laced with mock encouragement. "Show us what you've got. Or maybe calculus isn't exactly your thing." The words hung in the room like smoke. The implication was clear. Some students let out soft chuckles, the kind that grow louder when no one stops them. A ripple of laughter spread, and suddenly Jamal wasn't just a student in a math class. He was the punchline. He felt the weight of every gaze, every smirk pressing down on him, until it was almost suffocating. He stared at his notebook, his fingers tightening around the pen, until the plastic groaned. His chest burned with the familiar ache of being singled out, not for his mind, but for the color of his skin. It wasn't the first time. It never was. In subtle ways and sharp ones, reminders came often. The comments about scholarships he must be counting on, the surprise when he aced a test, the quiet whispers that followed him down the hall. This was different. This was public. This was a spectacle. Chandler leaned against his desk, arms crossed, as though he had already won. "What's the matter? Too tough? That's okay," he said, pretending sympathy, while feeding the room's laughter. "Not everyone's cut out for calculus." The laughter swelled again, no longer nervous but entertained. Some students exchanged glances, their eyes flicking between Chandler and Jamal like spectators at a cruel game. Others looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Silence, after all, was safe. Jamal's heartbeat pounded in his ears. He could feel his mother's voice echoing from memory, urging him to keep his head down, to survive the moments that weren't made for him. Survival had always been the lesson. But something inside him cracked under the weight of the humiliation. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was theft, of dignity, of belonging. He closed his notebook slowly, the sound sharp in the quiet. His chair scraped against the floor as he stood. The laughter faltered, replaced by curiosity. Chandler's smirk deepened, as though pleased his bait had worked. Jamal didn't look at him. He didn't look at anyone. He fixed his eyes on the whiteboard, on the impossible problem waiting there like a taunt. Each step toward the front felt heavier than the last, the silence of the room amplifying the sound of his sneakers against the tile. The closer he got, the more he felt the heat of their stares, the pressure of expectation. Not that he would succeed, but that he would fail spectacularly. He was supposed to be a joke. That was the script Chandler had written. But Jamal wasn't laughing. He picked up the marker Chandler had left on the tray. It was smooth, cold, and slick with the faint residue of ink. His hand trembled, not from fear but from the storm of emotions swirling beneath his skin. Anger, humiliation, defiance. They collided all at once, threatening to consume him. For a second he thought of dropping the marker, of retreating back to his seat, of sparing himself the risk of failing publicly. Then he remembered the sound of their laughter. The way Chandler's voice had cut into him with deliberate cruelty. The way they expected nothing of him but failure. No, he thought. Not this time. The board loomed in front of him, the symbols daring him to falter. He lifted the marker and pressed it against the glossy surface. The squeak of ink meeting board filled the silence, like a drumbeat. His first line was steady, deliberate, the beginning of a calculation he had rehearsed 100 times in his mind, though never on this exact problem. Step by step he began to carve through the complexity, his focus narrowing until the laughter, the stares, the weight of the room all blurred into background noise. Chandler shifted in his seat, the smirk on his face faltering slightly. Whispers rippled through the classroom, not of mockery this time, but of surprise. Jamal's hand moved faster now, the rhythm of his thought translating into the confident arc of each number and symbol. What was meant to humiliate had become a stage, and Jamal wasn't stumbling. He was standing taller with each line he wrote. The problem wasn't solved yet. The hardest steps lay ahead, each one demanding precision and clarity. But Jamal didn't hesitate. His mind was sharp, his determination sharper. He wasn't solving just for himself anymore. He was solving for every moment he had been underestimated, every quiet slight he had swallowed, every door that had been closed before he could knock. And for the first time, the classroom wasn't laughing. The marker tapped against the board as Jamal paused, scanning his work, preparing for the next step. The silence was thick, almost unbearable, every student waiting to see if he would falter or finish what no one believed he could. Chandler leaned forward, his arms uncrossing, his smile gone. Jamal didn't walk out. He didn't retreat into silence. He walked to the board, ready to finish what had begun as a cruel joke, but was about to become something far greater. Jamal doesn't walk out. He walks to the board. The marker's squeak still echoed in Jamal's head as the bell released the class into the hallway. A tide of backpacks and perfume and footsteps. He didn't hear the usual end-of-period chatter. He only heard the wordless thud of his own pulse. He had stood at the board and started to carve through the problem. Not finished. Not yet. But he had refused to be the punchline. That refusal clung to him like static as he slipped into the corridor and let the crush of students carry him away from the room where everything had shifted by a few quiet degrees. He kept his gaze low. Every conversation sounded like it might be about him, even when it wasn't. A stray "did you see" made his shoulders tighten. Shoes squeaked. Lockers slammed. The smells of cafeteria pizza and dry erase marker mingled in a way that would forever smell like adolescence, and something smaller than a dream. He moved like a shadow between brighter lives, a practiced glide that kept him safe from eyes and questions. By the time the final bell rang, and the sun tilted toward late afternoon, he was already halfway home, cutting down Maple Avenue where the sidewalk cracked around stubborn tree roots. Houses got smaller on this side of Westbrook, lawns thinner, porches closer to the street. On their stoop, a chipped ceramic frog held a plastic welcome sign like it had for years. He ran a thumb over its rough edge before he pushed the door open. "Hey baby," Denise called from the kitchen, not turning from the skillet. "You want a plate now or later? I'm on a tight clock." Her voice filled the small house like warmth. The scent of onions and garlic rode the air, familiar as the creak in the hallway. Jamal set his backpack down by the couch and hovered in the doorway. His mother's waitress uniform was half-buttoned. The black pants were already on. The top hung loose over a tank, and her hair was wrapped into a quick bun that meant she was between jobs and counting minutes. "Now's fine," he said, trying to sound normal. She glanced over, reading him the way only she could. "You okay?" "Yeah." He grabbed a glass from the cabinet. "Just tired." Denise used the back of her wrist to swipe sweat from her forehead. the skillet spitting softly as she shook it. Long day? Long, he said, and took a sip of water to keep anything else from falling out. She didn't push, not yet. Instead, she slid a plate toward him. Rice, beans, and a pan-seared chicken thigh, dusted with paprika. Eat, she said. Calories first, talk second. He ate. The first forkful grounded him. He listened to the familiar soundtrack of their home. The low hum of the fridge, the neighborhood kids yelling 2 doors down, the muffled TV from Mrs. Alvarez's place. Through the thin walls, on the counter lay a stack of bills fanned out like a weak hand of cards, a sticky note on top that read Friday tips in Denise's tidy script. Underneath, a brochure for honors night, peeked out, the school's crest stamped in self-congratulation. How's the class? She asked after a beat. Back turned, voice casual. Jamal's fork paused. He set it down as quietly as he could. It's fine. She turned, catching the tiny fissure in his tone. Jay. She used the soft version of his name, the one that meant no pretending. What happened? He looked at the plate. The chicken had already cooled at the edges. Mr. Chandler called me up to the board. Gave me a problem like, not even from the unit. Denise stilled. Okay. He thought I'd choke, Jamal said, the words dry and flat, as if naming it might make it small. Everyone laughed. Her face shifted, pain first, then composure, the dignified mask she wore when the world demanded more from her than it paid for. And you? I started it, he said. Didn't finish before the bell. But I didn't walk out. She set the spatula down like it suddenly weighed something. Good, she said, voice level. Good, baby. I don't know if it was good, Jamal said. It was just necessary. Denise stepped closer and touched his forearm with a light press that told him she heard the ache under the words. You hungry for anything else? Just quiet, he said. She nodded. We can do quiet. Then, after a moment, I'm proud of you. He wanted to soak in that sentence, hold it up to the light. But pride felt fragile and perishable in this house, something they didn't leave out for long. He gathered his plate, rinsed it, slid it into the drying rack. Denise was already fastening the last button on her shirt. I got the night shift, she said, stepping into her shoes. If I don't get the early tips, the late ones are stingy. You good here? Always, he said. She picked up her keys, then paused at the door. You know, she added, careful, you don't have to prove anything to anyone in that room. Jamal looked at her, at the truth and the limitation tucked inside it. Maybe not to them, he said. But to myself, I think I do. Denise's eyes softened. Just don't let proving become bleeding, she said. You hear me? I hear you. When the door closed behind her, the house exhaled into evening. Jamal stood in the quiet until a different pulse called him. The desk in his room, the one he had scavenged from a yard sale 2 summers ago. Its surface sanded smooth and stained by midnight coffee. He crossed to it, flicked on the lamp, and slid open the top drawer. Inside lay his private world, a battered composition notebook thick with loose pages, a geometry text scavenged from a college's discard pile, a thumb drive with course videos he had found online, and a folded printout of an article titled Black Students in Advanced Math, an invisible pipeline. He set the notebook down with reverence. On the first page he had written a sentence at 15 that embarrassed him and sustained him in equal measure. If they don't expect you, arrive anyway. The pages after that were a cartography of his mind, derivatives, and integrals, little proofs, short notes to himself about mistakes and breakthroughs, sentences like honor the idea before the steps. He flipped to a recent section where he had been tinkering with substitutions, just for the pleasure of watching equations unfold. Numbers had always made sense to him in a way people didn't. Numbers didn't ask who he thought he was. Numbers didn't laugh. He pulled his laptop closer and lifted the screen. The wallpaper was a black square with small white text in one corner, a quote he'd found from an old mathematician, about patience being the companion of wisdom. The browser opened to bookmarked pages, tutorials, a forum where he never posted, but often read, a PDF of a university problem set. One tab was different, the Westbrook Unified School District portal, notifications blinking like distant red lights. He clicked it without thinking, half hoping for nothing. A new message sat in his inbox. The subject line made his mouth go dry. Parent advisory, academic placement review. He opened it. The email was dated 2 months earlier, sent to a general district address, and forwarded from there. It summarized a conversation among relevant parties about whether some students were properly placed in advanced courses, with mention of maintaining cohort integrity. His name sat in the third paragraph like a nail. Rivers Jamal. Recommendation. Monitor. Consider reassignment to pre-calc if performance declines. Attached was a comment from C. Chandler. Jamal clicked again. The comment was short. While showing effort, Jamal seems out of step with class pacing, struggles with spontaneous logical reasoning, may benefit from slower environment. He read it 3 times, each pass stripping something from him and replacing it with heat. He closed the laptop slowly and sat in the dark for a minute, listening to the neighborhood's soft noises, a bus panting to a stop, laughter on a porch, a dog's indoor bark. Out of step, he felt the words like grit in his teeth. Slower environment. No one had told him. No one had asked him. A recommendation about his future had been written without him present. His phone buzzed on the desk. A vibration that skittered across the wood. He flipped it over. A text from an unknown number. Heard about calcs today. Wild. You okay? No name, just the carelessly curious tone he hated. He set the phone face down. For a few minutes he just breathed, in and out, counting to 4, a trick Denise had given him when he was younger and drowned by noise. When the count steadied him, he pulled the notebook closer and uncapped a pen. The page greeted him like a door he could close from the inside. He wrote the date in small, neat numbers, then a title that felt like a dare. After the joke, he began to work, not on homework, not on anything assigned. He set up a problem he had found last month, one that had lived in the back of his head like a song you can't quite name. He moved through it, line by line, feeling the small relief of competence, of movement, of choosing his own pace, faster than anyone expected, slow where it pleased him to be exact. Somewhere between substitution and simplification, he felt a seam inside him slip into a new alignment. The day was still burned into him, but now it was fuel. A knock thudded against the front door. Sudden and too loud. Jamal jerked, pen blurring a line. The clock said 7:24. Denise didn't knock. She called, texted, sang through the door when her hands were full. He stood, heart high in his throat, and walked to the living room. Through the peephole, the hallway bent into fisheye. On the doormat stood a girl he recognized from school. Ava Hart, tall hair in a loose ponytail, still in her Westbrook hoodie. Her expression hovered between resolve and apology. Jamal hesitated, then undid the chain, and opened the door halfway. The hallway's fluorescent light washed them pale. "Hey," she said softly. "Can I?" She glanced down the hall, and lowered her voice. 2 minutes? He shifted, surprised to see her here. They had shared classes since freshman year, but never conversation. She was one of the kids who always looked like she belonged in bright rooms. "What's up?" he asked. Eva held up her phone. Screen dark. "I heard what Chandler did. I wasn't in the period, but people are talking." She met his eyes. "I'm sorry." The words landed oddly kind and useless, and not small. He didn't know what to do with them. "Thanks," he said. He kept the door at the same halfway open, a barrier that felt safer than politeness. "There's something else," she said, and her throat worked like the words didn't want to leave. "Last semester I asked Chandler about why there wasn't more diversity in calc. He laughed, said the pipeline was what it was. Then she scuffed her shoe, angry at the floor. He joked that if he curved for charity cases, parents would riot." Heat flared behind Jamal's eyes, not at her but at the shape of the story. "Why are you telling me?" "Because it's wrong," she said quickly. "And because if you want to say something, I'll back you. I know that's nothing, but it's not nothing." He studied her face, trying to decide if this was pity or courage. It looked like a little of both. "I'm not saying anything," he said, and watched her shoulders fall. "Yeah, okay," she said, nodding, a small light returning. "Okay." She stepped back. "Thanks for opening the door." "Thanks for knocking," he said, which sounded strange but felt true. When the door shut, the noise of the hall muffled back into the house. Jamal stood for a second with his palm on the wood. Then he went back to his room and opened the laptop again, as if a magnet had been built into the hinge. He didn't go to the school portal. He went to a different bookmark he had saved months ago and never clicked. State Academic League Mathematics Division. The website looked outdated, blue banner, clunky fonts, a photo that screamed last decade. but the dates were current. Registration was still open. A downloadable syllabus listed topics that felt like home series. Optimization, integrals, clever little traps masquerading as regular questions. He scrolled to the bottom. The instructions were meticulous, the kind of bureaucracy that deterred the easily discouraged. Students needed a sponsor, a teacher, a signature. His cursor hovered over the PDF icon as if heat came from it. Saying yes here would mean stepping out where there was no cover. It would mean scrutiny. It would mean Chandler. The cursor drifted away. He exhaled, long and thin, and closed the tab. He flicked off the lamp, then flicked it on again. Darkness still pushed too close. He pulled the composition book back into the light and began to outline something he had never allowed himself to map. A plan. He wrote in small, tight script, the way he always did when he wanted his thoughts to behave. 4 weeks, he wrote. Everyday practice. Past papers. Timed sets. Weakness, trig identities under pressure. Fix. Drill. He created a list of sources, both official and stolen from the internet's generous back alleys. He sketched a schedule around Denise's shifts and bus timetables, and the few minutes before his first class when the library sat mostly empty. His phone buzzed again. He ignored it. He could feel a new sensation in his chest. Not quite fear. Not quite anger. A third thing that tasted like resolve. He thought of Chandler's comment about slower environments, and almost laughed. He thought of Ava's hand, uncertain at his threshold, and how even that small act had nudged something in him toward the open. He thought of Denise's warning, don't let proving become bleeding, and how he would have to thread a needle between pride and harm. Another tab opened under his fingers. A university's open courseware. He clicked into a lecture he had already watched twice, and began again, this time with a stopwatch running. He took notes in the margins, not pretty ones, useful ones. When the professor drew a graph, Jamal annotated the axis with a memory. Don't forget domain fences. When the professor paused for a question that would never reach through the screen to him, Jamal imagined asking it, and then answered himself. Hours thinned, the house ticked and settled. Somewhere a siren arced past like a brief blue comet. He stretched, rolled his shoulders, and set a fresh page. He wrote a single sentence in the center to keep himself honest. Do it quietly. A floorboard outside his door creaked. He froze, then smiled to himself. The creak meant nothing. The building was old and honest, and always announcing itself. Still the sound lined up with the thought forming behind his eyes. Secrecy. Not hiding. He had done that for years. But secrecy with purpose. There was a difference. He reached for the thumb drive, slid it into the laptop, and created a folder within a folder within a folder, naming the chain something boring and forgettable. Spanish Project, Unit 4 Drafts. Inside he built a spreadsheet with tabs, topics, times, errors, fixes, notes if I choke. He color-coded the columns though no one would ever see them. He was building a machine for a single purpose. Precision under heat. His tiredness came in waves now. He let it crest, then pass. He listened for his mother's key, but the night told him she was still miles away, exchanging smiles for tips and swallowing the names. Customers called her as if they were nothing but air. He stood, went to the mirror over the dresser, and studied the face that would be watched if he stepped forward. Eyes that held more patience than he felt, mouth that bent toward quiet, because quiet kept him safe. He tried on a different expression, and watched it fail to look natural. He laughed once, without humor, and returned to the desk. He opened one more tab, a small one that felt like lighting a match, a public archive of past state academic problems, with an unassuming link reading. Practice Test A. His mouse hovered, then clicked. A new page bloomed. Jamal read the first question, and felt a surprised smile press at his cheek. It wasn't the exact problem Chandler had thrown like a grenade, but it was a cousin recognizable bones under different skin. He set the stopwatch. He began. Ink moved. Time measured. A wrong turn became right on the second attempt. On the third it became muscle memory. He went to the second question, then the third. The clock's red digits scrolled on, indifferent to pride or fear. When he finally looked up, the room had changed color. The night had gone from new to old, from blue to gray. He flexed his cramped hand and closed the notebook, palm stinging from effort that felt like truth more than pain. He returned to the State Academic League page and stared again at the line that mentioned a teacher's signature. He copied the registration form anyway and saved it under the Spanish Project Labyrinth. then dragged the tiny icon into a folder named Soon. He shut the laptop with care, the way you close a secret. In the dark of his small room, while Westbrook slept, and the whiteboard at school still held the ghost of his incomplete solution, Jamal made a decision that no one would see coming. He would not ask permission. He would build proof. He slid the notebook beneath his mattress and, for the first time since the room had gone quiet after Chandler's joke, his breath came easy. Without telling anyone, not even Denise, Jamal begins a hidden training regimen for the state competition, quietly constructing a plan to prove them all wrong. Jamal woke before dawn with the same thrum in his chest he'd carried to sleep, an engine idling, waiting. The house was dim, the hallway a tunnel of soft gray. Denise's shoes weren't by the door. She was still on shift. He brewed coffee carefully, counting scoops like steps in a proof, then slipped his composition notebook from beneath the mattress, and reviewed last night's problem sets with a pencil tucked behind his ear. The clock hands crawled toward morning. He packed his bag with the same secrecy as the night before, the textbook buried under a hoodie, the notebook inside a binder labeled Spanish. Every fold and zipper sounded loud in the quiet house, like the world might overhear his intentions if he wasn't careful. By first period, Westbrook High was a hive. The Whisper campaign had found its tempo overnight and arrived at school fully dressed. Laughter traveled in little pockets down the corridor, split by locker banks and doorways. Someone had captured a grainy photo of Jamal at the board, shoulder angled, marker raised, expression set, and slapped a caption on it that hit like a push. Extra credit for effort? The image hopped from screen to screen like static. In a different version, the caption read, POV when coach puts you in the wrong game. Another leaned hard into a stereotype, splicing the photo next to a rapper's album cover with a wink that wasn't a wink at all. As Jamal slipped into the hallway current, heads turned. Not all at once, not dramatically, just enough to make every step feel watched. That him? A boy whispered near the vending machine. For real? Said his friend. Across the hall, a girl smirked into her phone. He tried, she murmured, as if generosity were a grin. At his locker, Jamal kept his movements precise. He swapped books without looking up. The metal door hummed shut beneath his palm. A voice slid in from the side. Two bright Rivers, said Trent Callahan, a senior whose confidence came from the kind of assurance you inherit and then mistake for your own making. He leaned his elbow close to Jamal's locker, smiling like they were in on something together. Yo, heard you went for it yesterday. Respect, man. Takes guts. Jamal's jaw tightened. I went to the board, he said. That's all. Trent put a hand to his chest theatrically, and the crowd went wild. He chuckled, dropping his voice to a stage whisper. You know Chandler's whole thing is like, sink or swim, right? He's just trying to get you ready for real life. Jamal closed the lock with a soft click. Thanks for the lesson. Hey, I'm just saying, Trent continued, undeterred. Not everyone's built for advanced math. It's not a crime. There's like tons of other stuff to be good at. Good to know, Jamal said. He stepped away. Trent's no shade followed him like a tag, light enough to deny, sharp enough to cut. In the commons, two juniors were huddled over a phone. Volume up. A tinny imitation of Chandler's voice sailed into the air. Not everyone's cut out for calculus. Repeated in a loop. A meme template. The joke eating itself and getting hungrier. Jamal paused at the edge of the group, watching his own humiliation mutate. In one version, someone added a laugh track. In another, a scoreboard popped up in the corner. Class 1, Jamal 0. He looked away before he could see the comment. Jay? Ava Hart called softly, stepping up beside him with a caution that felt like courtesy rather than fear. Morning. He blinked, surprised she'd approach with an audience. Morning. You good? She asked, the words simple and weight-bearing. Getting there, he said. Her gaze flicked toward the screen and back. They'll get bored, she said. They always do. But what Chandler did wasn't boredom. It was a choice. I know, Jamal said. He let his voice go flat so it wouldn't go sharp. It's fine. Eva studied him. I don't think fine is what you mean. Before he could answer, a teacher walked past, the AP US history guy with sleeves rolled to the elbow and a liberal bumper sticker reputation. He heard the looped mockery, glanced at the kids, then at Jamal, and did nothing. Not even a phone's away. The smallness of the omission landed leader than any joke. Eva watched the teacher's back recede. They hear it, she said quietly. They just don't want to be the one to turn it off. In second period, the whispers slid under the door, A draft you couldn't seal. Jamal took notes in tight script, the teacher's voice surfing above a murmur of private comedy, as a few more versions of the meme found their way into the room. He kept his eyes on the page, his phone buzzed against his thigh. Once, twice, 3 quick pulses. He didn't check. He anchored himself in the clean logic of derivative rules, like they were a rope thrown into moving water. By lunch, the story had metastasized into something bigger than the original moment. A sophomore from another wing pronounced confidently that Jamal had cried. A freshman claimed he'd thrown the marker. He was shaking, someone added, like a leaf, the strands braided into a tapestry of narrative convenience. The black kid tried logic and logic rejected him. Jamal sat at the end of a table near the windows, facing the courtyard where a few students huddled against February wind. He unwrapped a sandwich from home, peanut butter and banana, and chewed with deliberation. An underclassman in a varsity jacket drifted by, grinning. "Yo, calculus king," he said, and 2 friends snickered. "Don't," Eva said sharply from across the table, turning a page in her econ notes without looking up. The jacket kid lifted his hands in mock surrender and drifted. Jamal leaned back and stared out at the mottled sky. "You don't have to be my bodyguard," he said. "Cool," Eva answered. "Then I'm just a person who's tired." "Of what?" he asked. "Of right being this quiet," she said. She looked at him then, eyes steady. "What are you going to do?" He chewed, swallowed, took a sip of water. "Homework," he said. "Same as always." "Jamal," she said, and the name made him feel seen in a way that risked ache. "You're not same as always. Not after yesterday." A cluster of boys at the next table burst into laughter. One of them slapped the table and mimed writing on a board with exaggerated confusion. "Bro, is an integral a type of sandwich?" he crowed. The punchline landed with high fives. A teacher at the duty desk checked her phone. Jamal gathered his trash, stood and tipped his chin toward the library. "I've got something to read," he said. The library was a pocket of quiet saturated with the smell of paper and dust. The librarian, Mrs. Ray, lifted a finger in greeting, and then dropped it, eyes flicking to the clock with its forever slow second hand. Jamal slid into a corral at the back where the shelves hid him from casual view. He took out his composition notebook and a sheet of scrap for calculations. He skimmed his notes from the morning, and then, under the last line, wrote 2 words, "Keep going." A shadow stretched across the desk. He looked up to see Coach Malloy of the basketball team, broad shoulders shaded by the fluorescent lights. "Rivers," the coach said mildly. "You ever think about track? You have the build, long stride." Jamal closed the notebook half an inch. "I'm good," he said. "Could use that focus out there," Malloy continued. "Sometimes being great is finding the right arena." "I know my arena," Jamal replied. Malloy nodded, unreadable. "All right, doors open if you want it." He turned and left before the conversation could feel like a rescue disguised as recruitment. The bell cut the library open and spilled the school back into the hallways. On the way to calculus, the rumor river widened. Jamal heard his last name used like a brand, detached from personhood. Near the stairwell, a girl said, "I mean, you can't blame Chandler, standards are standards," and her friend nodded like fairness was a code that only applied to keep gates closed. Inside the classroom, the air was too bright. Chandler stood at the board, back turned, writing neat bullet points. Review chain rule. Practice optimization. He faced the room as students slid into seats and put on his customary half-smile. "Phones away," he said. "Brains out." A hand went up in the second row. Parker, the boy who always asked 3 questions when one would do. "Mr. C," he said, "can we get a redo of, yesterday?" He tilted his head toward Jamal, just enough to mark the target without naming it. A few laughs bubbled. Chandler lifted his palms as if to wave off mischief, and then let them fall. A silent indulgence. Jamal stared at his notebook. His heart beat differently in this room, like it had learned a new rhythm. Anger, focus, patience, repeat. Chandler started the review with problems that traced the edges of difficulty, but never stepped across. He called on his usual favorites. When Jamal's name didn't pass Chandler's lips, the absence felt deliberate, its own kind of commentary. Either you are spectacle or you are invisible. Halfway through, Chandler paused, marker hovering, and said lightly, "Yesterday's enthusiasm aside, remember, rigor matters more than theater." The class laughed. The sentence wasn't about Jamal on its face. It didn't have to be. Ava's pencil stilled. She looked at Jamal, a small question in her eyes. He kept his pen moving. After class, as students gathered their things, Chandler said, "Jamal, quick word." He waited as the room emptied, to a few stragglers. When it was just the three of them, Chandler, Jamal, and the dust motes in the sun, Chandler leaned against the desk and folded his arms, like a doctor ready with a diagnosis. "I want to be clear," Chandler began, voice measured. "Yesterday wasn't personal." Jamal kept his face neutral. "It felt personal. It was instructional," Chandler said. "This is an advanced class. Pressure is part of the process. If I didn't believe you could take it, I wouldn't have asked." "You didn't ask," Jamal said quietly. "You dared." Chandler's mouth twitched. "Semantics. My job is to prepare students for environments where they won't be coddled. If that environment isn't right for you, that's a separate conversation." Jamal absorbed the word coddled, like a bruise, absorbs pressure. "Is that a conversation you've had with other students?" he asked. Chandler's gaze held steady. "With any student who needs it." "Got it," Jamal said, the two syllables smooth and sanded of heat. He slid his notebook into his bag. "Anything else?" Chandler's voice softened a fraction, like a man convinced of his own fairness. "You're not a victim, Jamal. Don't let people make you one. If you want help, ask. If you want to coast, this class will spit you out." Jamal nodded once. "Thanks for the advice." He left before anger could ferment into something that owned him. In the hallway, the noise felt thinner, as if his mind had learned to mute frequencies that weren't worth hearing. He ducked into the stairwell, leaned against the cool rail, and let the quiet settle. "Hey," Ava said behind him. He hadn't heard her follow. "He corner you?" "Just a pep talk," Jamal said. "Right." She stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder but not touching. "If you're going to do something, do it soon, before the story sets like concrete." He studied the scuffed stair treads. "What if I'm wrong?"
"Then you're wrong," she said.
"And?" She waited. "You showed up. That's already not what they expected." He swallowed. "You ever feel like the ceiling is 1 inch above your head? Like you have to learn crouched?" "Every day," she said. "I just decided I don't live there." The unexpected twist arrived like a draft under a door. A notification pinged on Jamal's phone from an account he barely used. An old math forum, where he lurked. Someone had posted a thread titled, "Teaching by Humiliation." It started with a vague description of a teacher making a public example of a student in advanced math, and the comments had stacked quickly. A few defended rigor, more condemned mockery masquerading as pedagogy. In the middle of the thread, between screen names that meant nothing, a handle stood out. Ellis. The comment was concise. "The line between pressure and spectacle is where learning dies," and it included a link to the state mathematics competition with a note. "If the student wants a standard independent of bias, this is one." Jamal stared at the screen. "Who's Ellis?" he murmured. Ava leaned in. "No idea," she said. "But that link." He didn't say it out loud. The idea rose anyway, rehearsed in secret, and now suddenly louder than the whisper campaign. A contest with a rule book, and a clock, and no laugh track. A scoreboard where rumor couldn't add points. After last period, he went to the counselor's office, under the pretense of asking about scholarship deadlines. Ms. Patel, who had a way of listening that didn't turn questions into conclusions, smiled him in. "What can I help with, Jamal?" "Deadlines," he said, and then heart-quickening added, "And is there a school sponsor for the state math competition?" She blinked. "We haven't had one in a few years," she said. "Budget cut the stipend. Not many students were interested." "I'm interested," he said. She considered. "I could ask around. It would need to be a faculty sign-off." "Does it have to be a math teacher?" he asked. "No," she said slowly. "But it helps." He nodded, absorbing the shape of the obstacle. "If someone signs, can I do the registration myself?" "Yes," she said. "Why the sudden interest?" He met her gaze. "I want something measurable," he said. "Something that isn't about who's laughing." Ms. Patel's expression softened. "I can't promise a sponsor today," she said, "but I can knock on doors." "Thank you," he said, meaning it. In the hallway, he passed a cluster of teachers outside the lounge. Their conversation drifted out through the small gap before the door swung shut. "Kids in their phones," one said. "Everything's a scandal." "Chandler will be fine," another replied. "He does good numbers. Parent donations love his kids' scores." The door clicked. Jamal stood still, the words mapping the architecture he moved through. Numbers, donations, scores. The equation balanced, and he wasn't part of it. He turned and headed for the computer lab instead of the exit. The room was mostly empty. 2 students gaming under the pretext of spreadsheets, a girl printing with worry on her face, and the hum of machines like white noise. He picked a terminal near the back, logged into a guest account, and opened the State Academic League site he had already memorized. The registration form blinked up with bureaucratic indifference. Name, grade, school, division, sponsor. He filled the fields one by one, the cursor moving steadily. When he reached sponsor, he paused, heard Denise's voice, "Don't let proving become bleeding," and typed pending. He scrolled to the bottom, a checkbox. "I affirm that I intend to compete in accordance with the league's code of conduct." He checked it. Another, "I understand a sponsor's signature is required before test day." He checked that too. His finger hovered over submit. Somewhere in the building, a bell rang to mark the late bus. The screen's light made his hands look pale. He thought of a classroom gone quiet. He thought of a hallway that had borrowed his name without permission. He thought of numbers that did not laugh. Eva's text arrived like a nudge. "Do it scared if you have to." He pressed submit. The screen loaded, then flashed a message in institutional blue. "Provisional registration received. Sponsor verification required by March 12th. Notification sent to school administrator." Jamal leaned back, heart pounding in a way that felt like beginning. With the hallway still buzzing and the teacher's lounge door swinging shut behind casual complicity, Jamal signs his name to the state competition, triggering a notification to the very office that would decide whether his challenge ever sees the light. The provisional registration confirmation still glowed behind Jamal's eyes as he stepped into the late afternoon wind outside Westbrook. The air bit through his hoodie, but the cold sharpened him. He felt awake in a way that didn't ask permission. The notification would be sitting in an administrator's inbox by now, waiting for a click that could make his name official, or erase it with a polite flourish. He pictured the email drifting through fluorescent halls like a paper airplane, banking left toward the office where decisions wore smiles. By the time he reached Maple Avenue, clouds were stacking over the rooftops, flat and gray. He pushed open the door to the apartment and found Denise at the sink, sleeves rolled, wrists slick with dishwater. She had come home between shifts for an hour of quiet that never lasted long. The counter was clean except for a half-open stack of mail and a grease-stained notepad where she tracked tiny budgets like they were tightrope lines. "You're early," she said, glancing up. "Walked fast," he replied, setting his bag down. The composition book inside thumped softly, a heartbeat that didn't belong to paper. Denise dried her hands and studied his face with the attention of a nurse. "How's your chest?" "Steady," he said. "Mostly." She came closer, pressed 2 fingers lightly to his sternum. "Breathe like we practiced." He did. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. The breath settled where panic sometimes hovered. When he finished, she nodded and handed him a towel. "I made you a grilled cheese. It's a little sad now, but sadness don't ruin cheese." He managed a smile. "Thank you." They ate at the small table whose varnish had thinned along the edges. Denise watched him chew, then flicked a look at the mail, then back to him. "Anything happened today I should know?" He set the sandwich down. "A lot of phones. Some creative writing about my face." Denise winced. "Kids don't know how to let silence be kind." "It's not just kids," he said. "No," she agreed. "It's not." He debated the rest of it. The registration, the notification, the way his name had flown past the gate before anyone could shut it. He hadn't told her last night he was building a plan. Promising would have felt like gambling with her sleep, but hiding too much from her felt like lying to the person who'd taught him how to carry truth without giving it away. "I registered for something," he said finally. "Provisional. I still need a sponsor." Denise's mouth softened. "That word provisional does a lot of work for a little thing. It buys time," he said. "For what?" "For me to be ready when someone says no," he answered. She leaned back, arms crossed. "What is it?" "State math competition," he said, the words dropping like coins in a jar. "Timed. Rules. Scores they can't talk around." Denise exhaled. "I want to clap and I want to wrap you in bubble wrap. I don't have enough hands for both." "The registration triggers a notification," he added, eyes on the table. "Admin has it." Denise's eyebrows climbed. "So we've invited company." "Kind of," he said. "I need a signature." She stared at him like she was overlaying this version of him on the boy he'd been. Curious, shy, quiet, with a stubborn streak that only showed when something mattered. "What if they don't sign?" she asked. Then I compete next year, he said, or I find a way around it. She reached across and squeezed his hand. I need you to take care of you while you make your point. She said, I need you to sleep and eat. And remember, you're not a test. I know, he replied, though the truth was that the line between the boy and the proof he needed was blurring. The door buzzer cracked the room's quiet. Denise startled, then wiped her hands and pressed the intercom. Yes, it's Alvarez, came the crackling reply. You home, me? Denise buzzed her in. A minute later, Mrs. Alvarez, 2 doors down, sharp-eyed under a knit cap, stood in the doorway holding a worn canvas tote. I heard some nonsense today, she said without preamble, shifting the bag to her hip. So I brought something. Denise stepped aside to let her in. Come in, senora, she said, warmth in the honorific. You didn't have to. Mrs. Alvarez waved a hand. I worked 20 years in accounting before I came here. Numbers feed my bones. She turned to Jamal, eyeing him like he was a puzzle worth solving. The kids upstairs were laughing this morning. I told them laughter without compassion is just noise. They looked at me like I was the noise. She set the tote on the table and pulled out a stack of spiral notebooks, tabs bristling green and yellow. These are my old review notes. Not your fancy calculus, but the discipline is the same. Timers, drills, mistakes. I wrote them when my English was still poor, but my math was perfect. She patted the top notebook. You borrow, bring back when you don't need them. Jamal touched the spiral's dented edge. Thank you, he said, not sure how to place his gratitude without letting it tip into debt. You do not make a scene, Mrs. Alvarez said, eyes twinkling with mischief. You make a record. It's much louder. After she left, Jamal flipped one of the notebooks open. The first page was labeled in a careful hand, Error Log. Learn to love it. Columns were ruled for what I did, what it cost, and what will prevent this next time. He felt something steady under his feet. There was another knock 30 minutes later. Softer, almost embarrassed. Jamal opened the door to Mr. Yusuf from down the hall, a cab driver with a high laugh and a prayer rug tucked above his coat hooks. He held a dog-eared mechanical engineering textbook like a bouquet. I was cleaning, he lied cheerfully. This was my son's. He does computers now. I don't understand that. He thrust the book forward. But some chapters are beautiful. Stress, strain, balance. They remind you the world responds to force. You can measure how much. Jamal accepted the book, surprised by the weight of sudden community. Each gift not loud, not performative, simply placed in his hands as if they'd always known he would need them. He set it next to Mrs. Alvarez's notebooks, and felt the table become a small library of intention. After dinner, Denise disappeared into her room, and returned with a cardboard box he didn't recognize. This is yours, she said, setting it down, then hesitated. It was mine. He looked up, startled. Yours? She nodded. Senior year, I loved geometry, loved proofs, loved the way you could make a shape confess with just a few lines. She smiled, rueful. I asked my guidance counselor about AP math. He told me I was too social for advanced classes. I was working 2 nights a week, and still got told I was too social. That's the magic trick. Whatever you are, it's the wrong kind. Jamal blinked hard. You never told me that. I didn't want my ghost to crowd your room. She nudged the box toward him. Open it. Inside lay a thin folder, a faded championship flyer, and a small metal pin tarnished to the color of old pennies. He picked up the pin. What is it? City Math League, 1997, she said. I placed, not first, not last. I remember the question I got wrong, like it still owes me money. Her smile flickered. Then I stopped. You know the rest. He studied the pin. It wasn't beautiful, but it was exact. You kept it. I keep proof, she said. It helps when memory wears lies. He folded the pin into his palm. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said, gently fierce. Just carry yours differently. The apartment felt snug around them, the air thick with food and old paper and the starch of hope. Jamal moved to his desk and arranged the materials, like a field kit. Mrs. Alvarez's error logs, Mr. Yusuf's textbook, Denise's pen atop his comped notebook, like a small oath. He set timers. He drilled. He wrote mistakes in a column labeled without mercy. When his hand cramped, he shook it out and went again. But with each hour, another weight settled on his shoulders. Not fear of failure, exactly, but the drag of watchfulness. The whispers at school had thinned into a background hiss, But he could feel attention coagulating in invisible rooms, the admin office, the counselor's inbox, the parent group chat, where kindness purchased itself with critique, pressure pushed from the inside out and the outside in, a vice twisting towards center. Denise watched from the doorway, arms folded. "You're doing hours like a second job," she said quietly. "It is one," he said without looking up. "Where's the break?" "I'll earn it," he murmured. She came closer. "But that's not how rest works." He put the pen down, face gray with effort. "If I stop, the noise gets louder." Denise sat on the edge of the bed. "There's a difference between running and chasing," she said. "Make sure you're doing the first." He rubbed his eyes. "I don't know how to do either without being seen." Denise thought, then stood and fetched her phone. "Okay," she said. "If they're going to watch, we'll set the stage." She dialed, waited. "Hi, Ms. Patel. It's Denise Rivers. Sorry to bother your evening. I wanted to ask about sponsorship for a math competition." She listened, made a face. "I understand budget. I also understand volunteers. If it helps, I can organize parents to cover whatever the stipend used to be. We'll sell donuts in the parking lot if we have to." Her voice gained iron as she spoke. "Yes, I'll email you. Thank you for trying." When she hung up, Jamal looked at her, a little stunned. "You don't even like PTA," he said. "I don't," she agreed. "But I like obstacles even less." The pressure cooker hissed in a different key the next day. At the diner, Denise found conversations changing when she approached. Regulars who usually swapped gossip about sports mentioned that math thing, like it was a weather pattern. Some said it would blow over, some warned of storms. A woman with a manicured hand and a voice that chirped said, "It's so brave he even tried, bless his heart," and Denise swallowed the urge to hand her a dictionary open to the word condescension. Near the register, a contractor she'd served for years tucked a folded 20 under the check and slid it back to her. "For the competition fee," he said gruffly, eyes on the counter. "Tell the boy some of us don't think excellence is fragile." Denise nodded, throat tight. "Thank you." In the evening, as Jamal worked through a timed set, the hallway outside filled with the muffled life of neighbors. A scrap of conversation slid under the door. "That Rivers kid, always quiet. You hear about that teacher. They always make it about tone." The support felt real, but it also felt like expectation draped over his shoulders, heavy and well-meaning. Each kind word became a small hook that could catch on failure. He made an error in the last problem, a sign mistake that cascaded. He watched the solution unravel, felt panic's first tap against his ribs. "Stupid," he muttered too loud. Denise's voice came from the doorway, gentle and firm. "No, not allowed." "It was easy," he said, shame flushing his cheeks. "It was human," she corrected. "Log it." He wrote the mistake into Mrs. Alvarez's columns. "What I did, what it cost, what will prevent this next time." Under prevention, he wrote, "Check sign after substitution, always." He boxed the line in red. The unexpected twist landed in their inboxes, just after 9. An email, subject academic placement and sponsorship parameters. It came from the principal's office, a newsletter disguised as policy, buried at the bottom, under a paragraph about integrity and community pride. A sentence blinked like a warning light. Faculty sponsors are expected to ensure that participating students meet standards of current academic placement and demonstrated readiness. It was vague enough to mean anything, and sharp enough to be used for one thing. Denise read it twice. Jaw set. "They wrote this to say no without saying no," she said. "Or to make yes cost more," Jamal replied. She blew out a breath. "I'm going to that office tomorrow." "Don't," he said, immediately. "Not yet. Let me move first." "Baby," she warned. "If they see you coming, they make it about angry parents," he said. "Let me ask. If they slam the door, then you come." She stared at him, measuring the risk against his request. "Fine," she said, "but I'm not waiting forever." He nodded and turned back to the desk, heart thudding. He opened the registration site again, half expecting it to have evaporated. It hadn't. His provisional status still glowed, a fragile promise in pixels. He dragged Denise's pin from its resting place and set it where his thumb could find it. On the other side of town, in a house with better insulation and a kitchen gleaming under pendant lights, a different screen lit up. A new email had landed in Mr. Chandler's inbox, courtesy of the administrator tasked with looping in relevant faculty. The subject line read, "FYI, provisional registration, State Academic League, Mathematics." He clicked, The roster populated in neat black text. Second on the list, Rivers Jamal, Westbrook High, sponsor pending. Chandler's hand hovered over the mouse, his smile thinning into a straight line that revealed nothing and everything at once. Chandler stares at the roster, Jamal's name crisp on the screen beneath sponsor pending, and reaches for his phone ready to decide whether that pending becomes permission or a closed door. The roster sat open on Chandler's laptop, the blue banner of the State Academic League throwing a cool light across his face. Rivers, Jamal sponsor pending. He stared at the line until his reflection ghosted across it, until the name felt less like a student and more like a challenge. His thumb hovered over his phone's screen as he considered the angles, policy, optics, precedent, the newsletter he'd nudged the principal to send last night. Sponsors ensure readiness gave him cover. He didn't have to say no. He could simply make yes cost more than a 17-year-old could pay. He dialed the office. "This is Chandler," he said, voice smooth. "Loop me on any follow-up regarding Rivers' registration. I want to support the right decision." "Of course," the secretary said, her keyboards clacking. "We'll keep you posted." "Great," he replied, "because readiness matters." He hung up and watched the cursor blink in the compose window of an email to Ms. Patel. He wrote, "Happy to discuss sponsorship criteria," and then deleted the sentence. He didn't need a paper trail. A conversation would do. By third period, the next day, Jamal could feel a new temperature in the building. Warmer in the hallways, colder in the rooms. Eyes tracked him with a mixture of curiosity and sport. Word had leaked that he'd registered. The leak had tone. It's cute. It's audacious. It's delusional. Pending tasted like a dare to the crowd. He slid into his seat in calculus and rested his notebook at the exact corner of the desk. Ava slipped into the chair behind him, tapping his heel lightly with the toe of her sneaker. "Are you okay?" And he didn't turn but let the signal land. Still standing, Chandler walked in, crisp tie just so. A man prepared to teach rigor and reputation in equal measure. "Phones away," he said, setting his mug down. "Unless you're calculating limits, in which case congratulations, you've invented a new branch of math." A smattering of laughter. He picked up the marker. "Before we begin, a housekeeping note." His tone was casual, the kind he used for field trip forms. "I hear there's interest in the state competition." "That's wonderful. I applaud ambition." He smiled with his eyes, not his mouth. "But we don't confuse ambition with aptitude." The class tittered. Jamal felt his spine pull taut. Chandler kept going, eyes scanning the room without landing. "As of this year, sponsorship requires that students demonstrate readiness, consistent test performance, ability to work under pressure, respect for classroom protocol. This ensures our school's reputation remains aligned with excellence, not theatrics." A boy in the second row, Parker, habitual questioner, snorted softly. "So, like, no stunt entries?" Chandler let a grin flicker. "Let's say we prefer substance over spectacle." Heads turned toward Jamal, in little practiced glances. Not a stare, never enough to get caught, but enough to make heat creep up his neck. He kept his pen steady on a blank page, writing the date as if it were an equation. Ava's voice came low, but clear from behind him. "What does theatrics mean in a math room?" Chandler turned, surprised by a student pressing the implied. "It means," he replied, light as glass, "we don't make class a stage for whatever drama is happening online." "Or in here," Ava said, not quite under her breath. A soft murmur rolled through the rows. Chandler cocked his head. "Is there something you'd like to share, Miss Hart?" Ava held his gaze. "Just that some of us think rigor can exist without humiliation," she said. "And that humiliating someone and then calling their response drama is convenient." Parker's eyebrows shot up. Trent Callahan twisted in his chair to catch Jamal's eye and mouthed, "Wow." A girl near the window whispered, "Spicy, like justice was a seasoning." Chandler's smile thinned. "Noted," he said. "Let's return to the chain rule before we forget what we're here to learn." He turned to the board and launched into derivatives. His handwriting was flawless. His voice stayed measured. The room wanted to move on, but the air wouldn't cooperate. It stayed stuck on the moment, when someone named what they all knew, and many benefited from that pedagogy. In the wrong hands could be a blade cloaked as a ruler. Midway through the exercise, Chandler called on the usual suspects. He paused once over Jamal's name in the gradebook, tapped the margin with the end of the marker, and moved on. Another absence that wasn't. The denial was its own kind of spotlight. When pens finally dropped, he clapped his hands. "Pop quiz," he announced. Groans. 3 questions. 5 minutes. No calculators. Eyes on your own paper. You know the drill. He passed the slips down the rows. Jamal's heart quickened as he read. Nothing wild, but sneaky with time. He started at the 3rd question, trusting his instinct to reverse the expected path. He moved quickly, wrote clean, checked signs, boxed answers. When Chandler called time, Jamal felt sure of 2 and unsure of 1. It was a fair quiz. That was the needle. Fairness in assessment, unfairness in story. Chandler collected the papers, shuffled them and scanned. Well, he said, lifting his eyebrows at a page. At least one of you is awake. He laid 3 quizzes on the front desk. Jensen, Hart, Callahan. Nice work. He didn't say Jamal's name. Then, with the ease of a man who knew how to bruise without leaving fingerprints, he added, and to whoever wrote try again on number 2. I agree. A low, mean laugh from Trent. Jamal looked at his hands. A small voice near the windows. Unexpected. Cut in. Priya Shah. Quiet. Top 10. Never invited to the loud tables. Lifted her chin. Why call out the wrong one and not the right ones? She asked. If you're just giving feedback, be precise. Chandler's gaze flicked to her. Because I'm protecting someone from embarrassment, he said benignly. By embarrassing them, she replied, deadpan. The room stilled. Chandler let silence do the work of power for a count of 3. We're done, he said. Open your books. Jamal turned pages. He couldn't see. Something in the room had shifted a degree. A tilt toward balance. Not enough. But not nothing. After class, Chandler's Jamal. A word had the shape of an invitation, and the weight of a summons. Eva stood to linger. Jamal shook his head once. It's okay, and she drifted into the hall with a look that said, if you need, I'm here. Chandler leaned against the desk, arms crossed. A posture practiced over years of gentle authority. I want to be candid, he said. Your provisional registration puts me in an interesting position. I can sponsor you. I can also decide I won't. That's not personal. That's stewardship. Jamal kept his voice even. What do you need to see? Consistency, Chandler replied. Not flashes. Your last test was fine. Your response to challenge less so. Walking to the board? Jamal asked. That response? Turning class into a referendum, Chandler countered. That's not how excellence works. Jamal swallowed the urge to say the email subject line. Out loud. Parent advisory. Placement review. C. Chandler. Commenter. Instead, he said, I thought excellence was measurable. It is, Chandler said warmly. And we will measure it. In here, with me. He let the word me sit like a gate. You want my signature? Prove to me the room helps you think. Jamal realized then what the test would be. Not just problems on a page, but behavior graded as deference, tone curved as humility. A rubric no one would publish. Okay, Jamal said. I'll do the work. I'm sure you will, Chandler answered. A tip? Fewer distractions. Stay off the forums. His eyes skimmed Jamal's face, finding the flinch at the word forums. Yes, he added smoothly. We see more than you think. Out in the hall, Eva touched Jamal's arm. What did he say? That I have to pass an invisible test, Jamal said softly, and smile while taking it. They moved with the crowd. Near the stairwell, Trent fell into step, grinning. Bro, you're really going to that nerd Olympics? Savage. Savage isn't the word, Eva said, cool as glass. Trent shrugged. Look, I respect the grind. Just don't drag the class when you crash. We all wear the jersey, you know. He winked, and Jamal felt the familiar mix of rage and fatigue that came when people called harm team spirit. He veered into the library instead of lunch. The stacks felt like a chapel. Mrs. Ray glanced up and smiled without asking anything. At a back table, he opened Mrs. Alvarez's error log and copied his quiz's second problem from memory. He worked it again, found the sign error, corrected it, underlined the check step twice. What will prevent this next time? He wrote. Pause before substitution. Look for hidden negative. He boxed the sentence hard. A shadow fell over the page. Priya slid into the chair across from him, not asking permission. You were right to start with number 3, she murmured. He wrote them to trap speed. Jamal blinked. You looked at my paper? I looked at your face, she said. And I know that face. I've worn it. She traced a semicircle on the table with her finger. If you want, I'll quiz you. 10 minutes a day. No talking. No praise. Just numbers. He studied her. Why? Because I don't like the story he's writing, she said simply. And because I'm tired of pretending my brain is a private project. He nodded. Okay. They set a timer. He bent over a page. She watched the clock. When time flared, she held out her hand for the paper and marked with a tiny dot where he'd hesitated. Not wrong, she said. Just where you flinched. Thank you, he said, and meant the words for more than the exercise. By last period, rumors had sprouted legs. Someone said Chandler planned to tighten standards for sponsorship. Someone else said he'd been told to keep a lid on the situation. The language of institutions had started to leak into student mouths, and with it came a subtle new posture, the beginnings of resistance. Eva printed flyers for a study circle. No names, no drama, just time and space. Priya handed out index cards with 2 words at the top, show proof. A sophomore sketched tiny integrals on sticky notes and left them in bathroom mirrors with the message, rigorous doesn't mean cruel. In the staff lounge, opinions broke clean. He's protecting the program, a history teacher said, pouring coffee. Not everyone can go. A science teacher replied. Gatekeeping isn't rigor, someone else added. Parents like his results, and the room let that sentence do too much work. After school, Miss Patel found Jamal outside her office, hands in his pockets, eyes steady. I've asked 3 teachers, she said quietly. 2 said they're too swamped. 1 said he didn't want to cross another department. I'll keep asking. Jamal nodded. Thank you. She hesitated. I'm not supposed to tell you this, but Chandler flagged you for monitoring last semester. That's why the portal note existed. He thinks he's being fair. She held his gaze. Fairness isn't always the same as equity. I know, Jamal said. A small relief that someone was willing to name the thing instead of circling it. And Jamal, Ms. Patel added, I can't sponsor you, but I can help you train. Deal, he said. He walked home through air that felt heavy with wireless opinions. At the apartment door, Denise met him with a look that mixed pride and worry. How bad? She asked. Complicated, he said. They ate in tired harmony. After, while Jamal worked at his desk, Denise opened her laptop at the table. She stared at a blank document for a long minute. Then she began to type, slow and precise, words forming like bricks, laid with care. To whom it may concern, this is about the boy you are trying to erase in daylight, so you can say you didn't do it in the dark. She paused, deleted, rewrote, choosing phrases that landed like facts instead of accusations, because she knew how the tone police worked. She did not sign her name. She did not write mother. She wrote witness. She printed 2 copies and folded them cleanly. One she slid into an envelope, addressed to Principal Hayes, confidential. The other she tucked in her bag for morning. That night, the building hummed. A bus sighed at the curb. Somewhere, a camera phone replayed Chandler's theatrics line, with a new caption, when excellence asks you to be small. In Jamal's room, the stopwatch flickered its numbers, steady as a heartbeat. He worked until the shapes in his head felt like anchors, until the day's words lost their edges. At 7:12 a.m., the next morning, before students flooded the halls, a plain white envelope appeared in the school office inbox. No return address, the word wetness in neat block letters where a name should have been. Inside, a single-page letter detailed the joke in calculus. The meme echoes, the policy sent to chill one student's attempt at proof. It quoted phrases no adult had said aloud into a microphone. Not everyone's cut out. Charity cases. Reputation over rigor. It ended with a sentence that refused to ask for permission. If your standards require humiliation, they aren't standards. The secretary, halfway through her first coffee, read the page and felt the day tilt. As the principal lifts the anonymous letter from his inbox, another copy slides under the counselor's door, and a third stamped board lands in the district mail bin, igniting a chain of eyes that can no longer pretend not to see. Principal Robert Hayes read the anonymous letter twice before he let it fall flat on his desk, the paper's edges lifting slightly in the breath from the vent. The words were clean, unflinching, the kind that made denial feel like a childish game. If your standards require humiliation, they aren't standards. He glanced at the office window where the blinds were tilted just enough to cut the hallway into angled stripes. Beyond the glass, the school's morning machine was winding up, students moving in currents, teachers in doorways greeting with practiced smiles. Westbrook thrived on the appearance of order. The letter put a hairline crack right through it. He picked up the page again. No signature, only witness, in block letters. A second copy had been slid under the counselor's door. A third stamped board had been dropped into district mail. It was already bigger than him. That was the danger. Hayes' desk phone lit up with a soft chime. "Bob," said the secretary. "Ms. Patel is outside, says it's urgent." "Send her in," he said. Miss Patel walked in with a folder hugged to her chest, expression steady but warmed by concern. "You saw it?" she asked.
"I saw it," Hayes replied, tapping the paper.
She perched on the chair's edge. "This isn't the first time a teacher has used rigor like a shield," she said. "But this is the first time someone wrote it this clearly." "I have eyes," Hayes said, keeping his tone temperate. "I also have a school to run." "Those aren't opposites," she replied. "They're the same job." He exhaled through his nose, an old habit from years of conflict dressed as policy. "Where's Chandler?" "In his room," she said. "Teaching like it's a normal day." "Is Jamal here?" "Yes," Miss Patel said. "And no, he didn't write this. I'd be shocked if he had time between breathing and surviving." Hayes looked at the letter's crisp lines again. "The district office will call," he said. "The board copy ensures it." "Then being proactive looks a lot like courage," Miss Patel said. "We can't sit on it until it grows teeth." Hayes pinched the bridge of his nose. Reputation had a way of buying itself into decision-making. Westbrook's donor parents liked Chandler's numbers. He was measured, charming in the right rooms, polite enough not to offend the people who mattered, strict enough to keep the percentages beautiful on paper. Chandler's kids posted AP scores on Instagram like trophies. The PTA president, who happened to be the mother of one of Chandler's stars, had promised a $50,000 matching gift for a new STEM lab. The pledge letter, sitting 3 folders down in Hayes' drawer, ended with an innocuous line that now read like a warning. "We're excited to support stability and excellence." The phone chimed again. Superintendent's line. Hayes lifted it. "Robert." "Morning, Bob," came the superintendent's voice, smooth with urgency. "A letter hit my assistant's desk. Anonymous. About a math teacher. I've received it," Hayes said. "You'll handle it?" "I'm considering next steps." "Consider quickly," the superintendent said. "We're a week out from the equity audit we agreed to last spring. The board's in no mood for surprises." Equity audit. Hayes had nearly forgotten the date. The paperwork had moved like weather, always on the horizon. He pictured the external evaluators walking the halls with clipboards, asking polite questions that pressed on sore places. "Understood," he said. "And Bob," the superintendent added, dropping his voice. "Chandler's program attracts college eyes. I'm not telling you what to do. I am saying don't let one letter set fire to a good machine." The line went dead. Hayes replaced the receiver with care. A man putting the last piece on a teetering stack. "District?" Miss Patel asked. Hayes nodded. "They want it contained. That word does not belong anywhere near a child," she said. "Neither does a scandal," he returned, and hated himself for the reflex. He straightened, pushed the letter into a plastic sleeve. "I'll talk to Chandler." He found the calculus room between problems. The air had the quiet hum of concentration. Jamal sat in his usual seat, shoulders set, pencil moving. Eva glanced up, eyes watchful. Priya's focus was a blade. Chandler, at the board, turned with a practiced smile. "Principal Hayes," he said. "To what do we owe the visit?" 5 minutes, Hayes said. In the hall. Chandler followed. The door clicked. The hallway's echo took their words and stretched them. "There's a letter," Hayes began. 3, actually. "About you. About yesterday. About your sponsorship posture." Chandler's face did what it always did under pressure. Tidied. "Anonymous?"
Yes.
"So rumor with a thesaurus." Hayes kept his voice level. "Your language in class, humiliation and rigor, are not synonyms." "I agree," Chandler said easily. "But rigor does feel like humiliation to the unprepared." "Careful," Hayes warned. "This isn't about clever lines." Chandler spread his hands. "Then let's be specific." Jamal turned class into a performance. I corrected the course. Now he's trying to escalate with a competition bid that isn't supported by his consistency. My job is to steward excellence, not dilute it. Your job, Hayes said, is to teach the child who walks in the door. Chandler held his gaze. Including teaching him that standards aren't racist simply because they're hard. The sentence hit like a well-aimed dart. Hayes swallowed frustration. "You know exactly where the line is," he said. "You dance on it." I know exactly where the line is, Chandler said softly, and I haven't crossed it. Hayes thought of the security camera on the back wall. Grainy image, no audio. The footage would show Jamal walking to the board under bright lights, the class laughing in shape, but not in sound. Chandler's posture inscrutable. Plausible deniability had already rehearsed its script. I need your cooperation, Hayes said. No more comments about theatrics. No oblique jabs. If the audit team asks, we will present this as a misunderstanding, under review. Chandler's smile returned, measured. Of course. And the sponsorship? Hayes asked. I can't sign off yet, Chandler said, gentle as a refusal could be. Not with his current data. I'll set benchmarks. If he meets them, we can talk. Benchmarks. Hayes heard the words double life. A ladder for some, a locked gate for others. Put them in writing, he said, and keep them fair. Always, Chandler replied, the picture of compliance. Back in his office, Hayes stared at the letter's last line again. If your standards require humiliation, they aren't standards. He opened a new email, typed to himself, talking points, equity audit, donor sensitivity, student safety. He deleted donor sensitivity, retyped community partnerships, and hated the way speech bent around truth to stay welcome in rooms where checks were signed. Miss Patel reappeared in his doorway. Well, he'll play nice, Hayes said. He won't sponsor yet. Benchmarks. Benchmarks are only as neutral as the person who writes them, she said. I know, he answered. Help me write a counterweight. Document Jamal's work. Paper trails matter. They matter to people who want to follow them, she said. The rest prefer rumor. Help me anyway, he said quietly. She nodded, and for a second he remembered why he wanted this job before it learned to want things from him. An hour later, a parent appeared at the front desk, the PTA president, blazer sharp, greeting the secretary by first name like a benediction. She requested a quick hello with Hayes, and carried a folder advertising the STEM lab. In his office, she sat with composure. We're thrilled about the new lab, she said. So are our donors. Stability matters right now. We're aligned on excellence, Hayes said. And on careful messaging, she added. I'm hearing chatter about a situation in calculus. Parents worry that standards might be politicized. That won't happen, Hayes replied, the diplomatic answer crowding out the honest one. We'll keep our focus on learning. Wonderful, she said, rising with smooth gratitude. The check goes out next week. When she left, Hayes shut his eyes. He hadn't made a decision. He had allowed other people's decisions to choose him. The unexpected twist arrived, as a ping on his computer, an internal note from facilities. The equity audit team wanted to place observers in classrooms the following Tuesday. Among the requested classes, advanced calculus, first period. The observers had selected it based on a randomized schedule. Hayes laughed once, a sound with no humor. Randomness had a way of arriving with perfect timing. He called Miss Patel again. Observers in Chandler's room next week, he said. They'll see what he wants them to see. Unless they read what he doesn't say, she replied. I don't trust chance, Hayes said. I need documentation. He paused, then asked the question he didn't like himself for forming. And I need this to calm down before Tuesday. That's a strategy, she said. Not a solution. Sometimes strategy buys time for the solution, he answered. He drafted a message to Jamal's mother. He deleted it. He didn't want to give the impression of paternalism or distance. Either could be weaponized later. Instead, he asked the secretary to schedule a student check-in. Standard wellness touch base. The phrase made him wince. Jamal arrived at the office during last period. Shoulders squared, eyes bright from too much attention and too little sleep. Hayes gestured to the chair. Thank you for coming in, Jamal.
Yes, sir, Jamal said.
I read a letter, Hayes began. Several, actually. About what happened in calculus. Yes, sir, Jamal said again, careful as a man stepping through glass. I want you to hear me say this plainly. Hayes continued. You deserve a classroom where standards are high and dignity is intact. Something moved behind Jamal's control. Thank you, he said. Hayes folded his hands. I'm also responsible for the whole school, he said. For climate, for safety, for ensuring we don't turn learning into a courtroom or a stage. Jamal blinked. I'm trying to learn, he said quietly. I believe you, Hayes replied. I need you to help me keep this contained. Jamal's jaw tightened. Contained, he repeated. We have an equity audit next week, Hayes said. Outside observers. Eyes will be on us. I don't want you unfairly made into a headline. Jamal breathed once, twice. It's already a headline, he said. Just not with my name. Hayes glanced at the edge of the letter, peeking from the sleeve. Mr. Chandler will provide written benchmarks, he said, shifting to logistics. If you meet them, sponsorship remains a possibility. Benchmarks like be quiet and disappear? Jamal asked, a flicker of heat. Hayes kept his voice even. Benchmarks like consistent performance under pressure. You've taken steps toward the competition without a sponsor. That invites scrutiny. I know, Jamal said. I'm asking you. Hayes searched for the softest version of a hard sentence, to avoid bringing unnecessary attention to the situation while we sort it out. Jamal's eyes hardened. The words landed not as protection but as warning dressed in concern. Unnecessary attention, he said, and the phrase sounded like a door closing. Focus on your studies, Hayes added, aware of how generic he sounded. Let the adults do the rest. Jamal stood, every movement controlled. With respect, sir, he said. That's what got us here. Hayes lifted a hand. I'm on your side, Jamal. Which side is that? Jamal asked, not unkindly, just precisely, then caught himself. Sorry. Hayes swallowed. Careful, he said. Tone matters. Jamal smiled without humor. Only sometimes, he said. Hayes let him go. When the door shut, the office felt colder. He stared at the minute hand on the clock, watched it shudder forward, felt the school's fragile reputation stand up on his shoulders and ask to be carried again. In the hallway, Jamal walked past Miss Patel's door. She stepped out, searching his face. How'd it go? He told me not to make noise, Jamal said. The noise that hurts isn't mine. She nodded once, eyes bright with a mix of anger and care. Keep your plan, she said. We'll build you proof. He headed toward the stairs, the building's hum folding around him like weather. In his pocket, the composition notebook's thin paper list pressed against his palm. Each task a promise he made to himself because the adults around him were too busy balancing scales that weighed reputation heavier than justice. Behind him, the PA system crackled with the daily announcements. Clubs, lost and found. A reminder that concerns should be brought through appropriate channels. The last line was delivered in the principal's steady baritone, but to Jamal it sounded like a warning sent down a long hallway. Minutes after leaving the office, Jamal receives a formal notice to report to student services, an advisory for bringing unnecessary attention to a developing situation, complete with a signature line where he's expected to acknowledge the caution. The paper from student services sat on Jamal's desk like a verdict. Advisory notice, bringing unnecessary attention to a developing situation. A single line for his signature waited at the bottom, as if acknowledgement alone could convert accusation into truth. He hadn't signed it yet. It wasn't defiance exactly. It was hesitation, the quiet refusal of a boy who knew that ink on paper could become chains. Denise read it 3 times when he showed her that night. Her lips pressed so tight they almost disappeared. They don't even bother hiding the language anymore, she said. Unnecessary attention? What they mean is attention we can't control. She dropped the notice back on the table. Baby, this is bigger than you. And they know it. Jamal leaned forward, elbows on the table, fingers knotted together. I just wanted to solve a problem. That's all it started as. But they keep moving the problem. He shook his head. Now it's not math anymore. It's me. Denise reached across and squeezed his hand. That's how they do it. They can't question the numbers, so they question the person writing them. He nodded, though it didn't soothe the coil inside him. The pressure kept tightening. The mockery at school hadn't stopped, though something under it had shifted. More eyes watched him seriously now. Not just for entertainment. More whispers asked, is he really going to try? The attention, good and bad, was crushing in equal measure. The next day, after school, Jamal ducked into the library to escape the noise. He took his usual spot in the back, opening Mrs. Alvarez's error log. The familiar columns steadied him, but his mind wasn't quiet. He stared at a problem and saw Chandler's smirk behind the variables. His pencil hovered uselessly. You're holding it too tight. The voice startled him. He looked up. An older man stood just beyond the Carroll wall. Tall, skin the shade of deep bronze, with hair gone mostly silver, except for stubborn black strands near the temples. He wore a tweed jacket that had seen better years, its elbows worn thin, and carried a small leather satchel. His eyes, sharp, kind, and heavy with years, studied Jamal's grip on the pencil. Loosen up, the man said. The tighter you hold, the less control you actually have. Jamal blinked. Sorry, do I know you? Not yet, the man replied. Name's Ellis. Retired. I come here sometimes to read the journals. No one checks out. He glanced at the page. Error log. Jamal nodded cautiously. Helps me see where I mess up. Ellis's lips twitched in a small approving smile. Smart. Most kids avoid their mistakes like the plague. But the mistakes are where the gold is. He pulled out the chair opposite Jamal and sat, uninvited but not unwelcome. You were Vers, right?
Jamal stiffened.
Yeah.
I heard a little about you, Ellis said. Hard not to. Whisper travels fast in this town. Teacher tried to make you a punchline. You stood up anyway. Jamal flushed. It's not like that. Oh, it's exactly like that, Ellis said. Don't shrink it, but don't let it grow bigger than it is either. It's a moment. One of many you'll have. Jamal frowned. Why do you care? Ellis leaned back, fingers laced. Because I've been you. Different year, different room, same script. I was the black kid in advanced math when the idea itself was treated like a contradiction. Teacher said I should aim for something more practical. He meant less threatening. I aimed anyway. Jamal's eyes narrowed. And I made it out, Ellis said. PhD in mathematics. 30 years teaching at the university. Retired now, but not dead yet. He tapped Jamal's notebook. Still allergic to wasted potential. Jamal sat back slowly, processing. PhD. Ellis nodded. In algebraic topology. Sounds fancy. Really, it just means I spent too many nights trying to make shapes confess their secrets. He leaned forward again. But it wasn't the math that almost broke me. It was the noise. The laughter, the low expectations. The polite sabotage. I see that look in your eyes. You're hearing the same noise. For the first time in days, Jamal didn't feel like he was talking to someone who only half understood. Yeah, he said quietly. Ellis pulled a worn book from his satchel and slid it across the table. It was a university-level problem set. Margins filled with tiny annotations. Try these, he said. Not because they're hard, because they force you to think sideways. Lateral thinking is what keeps you alive when the straight path gets blocked. Jamal turned a page. Problems twisted and looped in ways that looked impossible at first glance. But the notes in the margins showed small doors hidden in the walls. He looked up. You wrote these back when I was your age, Ellis said. Found them in an attic box last year. I thought I'd forgotten the boy who wrote them. Then I heard about you. Something hot pressed at Jamal's chest. Why are you helping me? Ellis's smile softened. Because somebody should have helped me sooner. And because I don't want you to think you're carrying this alone. For a moment, the library's hum faded. Jamal's shoulders loosened. Just a little. Thank you, he whispered. Ellis nodded. But listen, help doesn't mean easy. If you want my time, you'll have to sweat for it. I don't coddle. Not then. Not now. I don't need coddling, Jamal said. Good, Ellis replied. Then meet me here tomorrow after school. Bring your notebook. Bring the mistakes too. We'll start where you trip. Jamal hesitated, then extended his hand. Ellis gripped it firmly. The following days fell into rhythm. School still stung. The whispers, the looks, Chandler's casual cruelty. But the afternoons were different. In the back corner of the library, Ellis pushed Jamal harder than anyone had before. He drilled him on proofs, made him explain solutions aloud, until the logic sang cleanly, forced him to start problems blindfolded to test his memory for structure. You hesitate here, Ellis would say, tapping a circled step. That's where the doubt creeps in. Doubt is fine, stalling isn't. Don't stall, decide. Or your algebra's perfect but you're missing the trap in the question. You're reading it like a student. Read it like an adversary. Every question wants to trick you. Don't let it. Sometimes Jamal left exhausted, head aching, but exhilarated. For the first time, the weight of expectation felt like a challenge he could shoulder instead of a rock meant to bury him. One evening, as they packed up, Jamal asked, "Why didn't you keep teaching after you retired?" Ellis paused, slipping the book into his satchel. Because the fight took more out of me than the math did. Meetings, politics, donors who smiled while asking if I was relatable enough for undergrads. I loved the numbers. I hated the noise. Then why now? Jamal asked. Ellis's eyes softened. Because you remind me that the numbers are still worth fighting for. And because maybe you'll carry the fight further than I could. The words lodged deep. Jamal didn't reply, but that night he worked until dawn, refusing to waste what had been handed to him. But Ellis wasn't gentle for long. At their next session, he dropped a new set of problems on the table. Denser, crueler, designed to choke. Solve these, he said. Jamal scanned the first question. His throat tightened. He tried, scribbled, erased, tried again. 15 minutes later, the page was chaos, nothing clean. Frustration burned hot in his chest. I can't, he muttered. Ellis didn't move. Say that again, he said. I can't, Jamal repeated. Louder. It doesn't make sense. I'm not. He cut himself off. Ellis leaned in, voice sharp. Good. Now you're finally where the work begins. You think success is the math you already know. It's not. Success is what you do the moment you fail. Jamal slammed the pencil down. But if I fail, you will fail, Ellis said, firm, uncompromising. Again and again. The only question is whether you stay down long enough for them to call it proof of what they already believed about you. The silence after was heavy. Jamal looked at the mangled page, breathing hard. For the first time, Ellis wasn't a lifeline. He was a storm. Dr. Ellis pushes the hardest problem across the table and says, show me how you lose, because only then can I teach you how to win. Jamal stares at the paper, realizing failure itself has become the next test. Jamal's notebook was covered in scars of work, red boxes around errors, arrows pointing to corrections, entire pages crossed out with thick black lines. Ellis had demanded he mark. Fail loudly. Ellis had said, don't let your mistakes hide in polite pencil. The rhythm of practice had become ritual. School, whispers, Chandler's tight smile, and then the library's back corner where Dr. Ellis forced him to confront the edge of his understanding. But now the calendar's edge loomed larger. The state competition, 3 weeks away, and Westbrook buzzing with speculation. Word had spread not just that Jamal registered, but that Chandler hadn't signed. Students whispered in hallways, how's he even in if Chandler won't back him? Another added, they'll probably disqualify him on the day. The rumor had its own momentum, a rolling stone he couldn't stop. Denise heard it too, waitressing a table of parents one night. When one leaned across the vinyl booth to say, it's admirable your boy wants to try, but maybe it sets him up for more disappointment, she smiled politely, but later told Jamal, their words aren't for you. They're shields for their kids. The week before the competition, Ellis handed him a slim manila envelope. Mock set, he said. Written by the league 2 years ago. Do it in full conditions. Jamal sat in the library carrel, timer set, and worked until sweat beaded on his temple. When he finished, his page was littered with erasures. But every box was correct. Ellis flipped through, nodding. Good, he said. But don't think correct equals prepared. You haven't felt the room yet. The room? Jamal asked. The room where you walk in already an outsider, Ellis said. Where the questions are hard but the stares are harder. That's the real test. And soon, the room arrived. The competition was held at Easton Hall, a grand auditorium in the state capitol where ivy crept up stone columns and glass doors gleamed under the morning sun. Denise drove Jamal there in her dented sedan, the silence between them heavy. She parked, cut the engine, and turned to him. You ready? She asked. No, Jamal said honestly, but I'm going anyway. Her lips curved into a half smile. That's my boy. Inside, the registration table stretched long. Volunteers in blue shirts checking off names. Students from across the state milled in clusters, their jackets embroidered with names of prep schools. Kingsley Academy, Meadowbrook, Ridgeview. Jamal stood in line alone, hands in his hoodie pocket. When he reached the front, the volunteer scanned the list. Rivers, Jamal, Westbrook. Her eyes flicked to the sponsor line. Pending. A pause. She looked up. Your teacher didn't sign. Before Jamal could answer, Miss Patel stepped forward from the side. She wore a modest blazer, hair pinned back, and handed over a signed form. I did, she said. Jamal blinked, stunned. You, administrative loophole, she whispered, sliding him a small smile. Not the math department, but still faculty. They'll hate it. Let them. The volunteer stamped the form. Registered. Jamal let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Thank you, he murmured. Don't thank me, Miss Patel said. Win or lose, you were always enough. The rest is just noise. But the noise had already started. Across the hall, a cluster of Ridgeview boys snickered. One stage whispering, that's the Westbrook kid, The one who choked on the board? Another chimed in. Guess they're letting charity cases in now. Jamal felt his shoulders tighten, but he remembered Ellis's words. Don't stall. Decide. He decided not to look their way. The opening ceremony filled the hall with echoing applause. A judge in a navy suit stepped up to the microphone. Welcome, competitors, to the annual State Academic League Mathematics Division. Today you'll face a 2-hour written exam. The top 10 scorers will move to the lightning round. May the best problem solvers rise. As the crowd clapped, Jamal scanned the room. Dozens of students sat tall, pens poised, their parents in the gallery above with cameras and pride. He sat near the back, alone, while whispers prickled at his ears. Who let him in? Westbrook? Really? Watch him crash in the first 10 minutes. He opened his notebook and wrote one line on the first page. If they don't expect you, arrive anyway. During the break before the exam, he stood by the water fountain when a girl from Meadowbrook approached. She was tall, blonde, her blazer crisp. You're Jamal, right? She asked. Yes, he said cautiously. I heard about your teacher, the calculus thing. Her tone was light, but the edge was sharp. That must have been humiliating. He straightened. It was. She smiled thinly. Well, I guess you'll get to redeem yourself today. Or not. She walked away laughing with her teammates. Ellis's voice echoed in Jamal's head. Every question wants to trick you. Don't let it. He realized it wasn't just the exam questions. It was the people too. They filed into the testing hall, rows of desks lined with numbered tags. Jamal found his seat, number 47, near the edge. Denise sat in the gallery above, clutching her bag, her knuckles white. Miss Patel slipped into a seat beside her. The proctor stepped forward. You may begin. Booklets opened. Pens clicked. The room filled with the scratch of paper. Jamal turned to the first page and froze.
Here it was. The problem sprawled across the top, bold and unflinching. A derivative tangled with trigonometric functions, almost identical to the one Chandler had scrawled on the board that day.
The very joke. The very weapon. Waiting again, this time in official ink. His breath caught. The laughter from that classroom echoed in his memory. Chandler's voice rang in his ears. Not everyone's cut out for calculus. For a heartbeat, the room blurred. Jamal stares at the page, realizing the competition's very first problem is the cruel joke Chandler once used to humiliate him. The question that broke him before has returned, this time with the whole state watching. The question stared back at him, merciless in its symmetry with the path. The exact shape of Chandler's mockery. Trigonometric tangles nested inside a derivative, now sat on official paper with the state seal at the top. Jamal's pen hovered, frozen midair, his hand trembling just enough for him to notice. Around him the room buzzed with quiet confidence. Pens scratched briskly, competitors leaned forward, already deep in calculations. To them it was just another problem. To Jamal, it was a ghost. His mind betrayed him, with images. Chandler's smirk, the ripple of laughter through the class, the way even friends of silence looked away that day. He heard the echo of not everyone's cut out for calculus, like a curse muttered in the rafters. The walls of Easton Hall seemed to close in, his throat tightened. The air grew heavy. Above, in the gallery, Denise's hands clutched her bag so tightly the leather squeaked. She could see her son's stillness from yards away. Beside her, Miss Patel whispered under her breath, Come on, Jamal. Don't let the paper beat you. On the floor, Jamal's pen still hadn't touched the page. The timer ticked. 2 minutes gone. Sweat beaded on his brow. The laughter from months ago crashed against the silence of the hall, until he almost couldn't tell the difference. His heart raced, every insult returning like a chorus. Scholarship case. Slower environment. Charity. Each word folded itself into the equation, mocking him line by line. Maybe they're right. The thought landed sharp. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I forced myself into a room that was never mine. The page blurred. His grip faltered. For a second he thought he might stand up and walk out, leave the paper blank, let silence swallow him before failure could. And then unbidden, Ellis's voice cut through the noise. Failure is where the work begins. Don't stall, decide. He blinked hard, focusing. The lines of the problem came back into view. For the first time he saw not Chandler's weapon but Ellis's challenge. A trick problem. A door disguised as a wall. He heard Ava's voice too, sharp and clear from the library days. Rigor can exist without humiliation. And Priya's quiet conviction. You were right to start with number 3. Their faith stitched around him. Fragile but real. Jamal drew a breath, steady and deep. He let the laughter drain out of his ears. He looked at the problem as if seeing it for the first time, not as a threat but as numbers waiting for order. His pen touched the paper. He wrote the first line of the solution. It was clean, deliberate. His hand no longer shook. Step by step the fog lifted. He saw the substitution. The trap Ellis had trained him to anticipate. He worked it through. The problem wasn't simple, but it was no longer monstrous. It was just math. And yet, he felt the stares. A boy 2 rows ahead glanced back, smirked, as if expecting him to crumble. A Meadowbrook girl whispered to her teammate, eyes flicking at Jamal. The pressure wasn't gone. It pressed heavier with every mark of his pen. But now it fueled him. 10 minutes in, he finished the first problem. He circled the answer, sat back, and exhaled. For the first time since the exam began, he felt something shift inside him. Not relief, but power. Above, Denise's eyes filled with tears, she refused to let fall. She squeezed Miss Patel's arm. He's in it, she whispered. Miss Patel nodded, eyes glistening. Yes, he's fighting. But even as Jamal moved to the second problem, the unexpected twist arrived. Across the hall, one of the proctors stood, clipboard in hand, whispering to the head judge. The judge frowned, looked toward Jamal's row, then nodded. Notes were scribbled. The proctor's gaze lingered on him before moving away. He caught it. His stomach tightened. They're watching me. Not just like everyone else. They were documenting him. The weight doubled. The question in front of him blurred again. Why me? Why now? He thought of Hayes's warning. Avoid bringing unnecessary attention. He realized attention had already arrived, summoned by forces outside his control. His presence here was already a challenge. His success already a problem for someone. For a moment, panic clawed back. His pencil hovered again. What if they're waiting for me to fail? Or worse, what if they're waiting to say I cheated, if I succeed? The spiral nearly dragged him under. But then Ellis's last words from their library session struck like lightning. Show me how you lose, because only then can I teach you how to win. Jamal closed his eyes. He set the pencil down just long enough to unclench his fists. Then he picked it back up, slower, surer. He didn't care if they watched. He would give them something worth watching. His eyes opened. The blur cleared. He leaned forward, pen sharp in his hand. Jamal closes his eyes, breathes once, and begins to write again. His first answer steady, confident and defiant, as if the very problem that once humiliated him has become the key to his resistance. The pen in Jamal's hand steadied like a compass finding north. The first problem, Chandler's cruel joke reborn in official ink, was conquered, circled, logged. The tightness in his chest eased, but not fully. The pressure in Easton Hall was alive, an atmosphere made of whispers and suspicion. He turned the page. New questions waited. Series expansions, optimization puzzles, integrals stretched across margins. Each own demanded sharpness, patience, and nerve. He dove in, solving with Ellis's voice echoing in his mind. Don't stall, decide. But as his pen moved, something else unfolded beyond the auditorium's walls. A Meadowbrook student had snapped a discreet photo before the test began. Jamal sitting alone, hood up, eyes down. The caption read, Westbrook's charity case about to drown in calculus. Pray for him. The post hit a private group chat, then jumped to Instagram, then to Twitter. By the first half hour of the exam, hundreds of strangers had weighed in. Why they always forcing diversity in STEM competitions? Simang, rooting for this kid. Hope he proves everyone wrong. Heard the story. If he wins, it'll be because of pity points. Don't aid me. The storm gathered momentum. Hashtags sprouted. Let him compete. Standards matter. Math is neutral. Inside the hall, Jamal didn't know yet, but the atmosphere shifted as phones buzzed in the gallery above. Parents passed screens back and forth. Denise's own phone lit up with text from coworkers. They're talking about him online. She locked the screen, refusing to show Jamal distraction through the glass. On the floor, he pressed through problem after problem. Each one was a duel. Some yielded fast, others forced rewrites, erasers, the discipline of logging errors in the margin. He could almost feel Ellis leaning over his shoulder. Show me where you trip, then stand up straighter next time. But then halfway through, doubt crept in again. The whisper of proctors still lingered. He felt eyes on him, judges, competitors, even the Meadowbrook girl who had sneered before the exam. He imagined their thoughts. If he succeeds, it must be luck. If he fails, it was inevitable. His hand hesitated. He looked up. Across the hall, a Ridgeview boy caught his eye and smirked, tapping his watch as if to say, "You're already behind." Jamal's pulse jumped. Above, Denise mouthed silently, "Breathe." He lowered his gaze, closed his eyes, inhaled for 4, held for 4, exhaled for 6, the rhythm his mother had taught him years ago, when the world first showed its teeth. The storm inside him settled enough to continue. Meanwhile, outside the hall, the story swelled. Local bloggers caught wind of the posts and began threads. One headline read, "Controversial entry, Westbrook student challenges state math league." Another countered, "From joke to justice, black teen faces bias at state competition." News traveled fast. By the 1-hour mark, thousands of comments bloomed. "He should have never been there. Lowering standards just to tick boxes. Kid looks focused af. Imagine the pressure he's under. Respect. If he flunks, watch them spin it as racism. Tired of it. If he succeeds, it will prove racism exists. Because look how much harder he had to fight." The auditorium had become a microcosm of something larger. Every gaze, every whisper, every problem solved carrying the weight of a national conversation. Jamal bent over question 16. It was brutal, nested fractions inside an infinite series. He attacked it, worked through substitution, lost the thread, restarted. Frustration pulsed hot. For a dangerous moment, he thought of ripping the page out. But then he remembered Priya's words in the library. "You flinched here." He circled the part he'd hesitated on, forced himself to slow, and finally unlocked the sequence. The answer emerged clean. He circled it with a calm he hadn't expected. Above, Ms. Patel whispered, "He's learning in real time. Right here, under their eye." Denise pressed her lips tight. "They'll still twist it." "Maybe," Ms. Patel said. "But he's writing truth in ink. Harder to erase than rumor." At the 90-minute mark, Jamal glanced up for the first time. Competitors hunched over, some biting pens, others scribbling furiously. He saw panic in faces he once thought untouchable. Kingsley boys with their elite coaching, Meadowbrook girls with their perfect blazers. They weren't invincible. And in that realization, his doubt cracked. He wasn't an imposter in their room. They were simply students, same as him, bound by the same rules of math. He turned the page to the final problem. His chest tightened again. It was monstrous, an optimization puzzle that sprawled across half the sheet. Time ticked down. He worked, erased, worked again. The solution dangled just out of reach. He bit his lip, felt panic rise, then remembered Ellis's challenge. "Show me how you lose." Instead of freezing, he logged the attempt in the margin. Tried method A, failed. Tried method B, too slow. The act itself steadied him. He tried again differently, and finally, at the 2-hour mark, the solution snapped into place. The proctor's voice rang out. "Time. Pens down." Jamal dropped his pen, chest heaving. He had finished every problem. Not flawlessly. He knew he'd stumbled. But finished. That itself felt like rebellion. But the storm outside was still raging. As booklets were collected, a breaking tweet hit thousands of feeds. Westbrook kid just turned in his test early. Walked out confident. Whole hall stunned. Except he hadn't yet. The rumor spread faster than correction. Some mocked. "Cocky much? He'll bomb." Others praised. "Legend in the making." The weight of both pressed down on Jamal as he gathered his things. His hands trembled, not from math anymore but from carrying the eyes of strangers he would never meet. The proctors stacked papers. The judges huddled in whispers. One pointed toward Jamal's row, murmuring. Another scribbled notes. Their faces were unreadable. And then, in a move no one expected, not even himself, Jamal stood. His desk screeched slightly against the floor. Heads turned. Competitors frowned. Judges paused mid-sentence. He lifted his bag, slung it over his shoulder, and walked up the aisle. His face was calm, unreadable. To some it looked like arrogance. To others it looked like survival. To Denise, watching from the gallery, it looked like her son refusing to be caged by anyone's expectations. The doors opened with a heavy creak. He stepped into the hallway, leaving the competition room buzzing. Judges whispering furiously. Jamal finishes early and walks out. The judges murmuring in disbelief. Was it confidence, collapse, or something no one in the hall could yet name? The hall outside the testing chamber smelled of dust and polish, a sharp contrast to the air Jamal had just left, thick with whispers, scribbled notes, and suspicion. His footsteps echoed too loudly against the marble floor as he walked, the weight of his bag slung over one shoulder. Each step was deliberate, but beneath the surface, his pulse pounded fast and uneven. Behind him, the doors sealed the judges in their huddle. They bent over papers, voices low but urgent. Pens marked margins. Calculators checked scores. A proctor whispered, "He finished everything." Another replied, "Or he rushed through." The uncertainty wasn't about numbers. It was about whether they could allow those numbers to tell the story they feared. Upstairs in the gallery, Denise and Miss Patel had followed Jamal's exit with wide eyes. "He left early," Denise whispered, gripping the rail. "Sometimes leaving is the loudest answer," Miss Patel murmured. But even she didn't sound convinced. The students were herded into the atrium while the judges tallied results. Competitors clustered in tight groups, trading nervous jokes, flipping through old notes as if to rewrite history. Jamal stood apart, leaning against a column, silent. Every so often a student glanced his way, smirking or sneering, as though his solitude confirmed their predictions. From across the atrium, the Meadowbrook girl from earlier whispered loudly enough to be heard, "Walking out early doesn't mean genius. It means giving up." Her friends laughed, tossing looks over their shoulders to make sure Jamal heard. He did, but he also remembered Ellis's voice, "Show me how you lose, because only then can I teach you how to win." For the first time, those words didn't sting. They steadied him. The announcement came an hour later. A bell chimed through the atrium, and the crowd pressed toward the grand hall where the results would be posted on a digital board. Parents crowded the gallery above, phones lifted, ready to capture history or humiliation. The screen blinked awake. Names began scrolling from the bottom, ranked by score. Dozens filled the lower tiers. Students craned their necks, some sighing in relief to see their names at least appear. Jamal's heart hammered. He searched line after line, but his name didn't appear in the bottom half. A boy near him smirked. "Guess he didn't even place." Laughter rippled. But then the names climbed higher. Westbrook High appeared. Rivers Jamal. Rank. The atrium went still for half a breath. Then the murmurs began.
That can't be right.
He must have gotten lucky. 19? From Westbrook? Jamal stared at the number. It wasn't a trophy, but it wasn't failure. It was proof. He was in the top 20 statewide. He had placed higher than some of the loudest, most polished competitors in the room. The screen shifted again, narrowing to the top 10, the lightning round finalists. The names ticked upward. Meadowbrook, Kingsley, Ridgeview. Jamal held his breath, telling himself not to hope. Then it appeared. Rivers, Jamal, ranks. The room broke into noise. Some gasped. Some groaned. A Ridgeview boy cursed under his breath. Parents above leaned forward, whispering furiously. Denise clapped a hand over her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. Miss Patel gripped her shoulder hard, steadying her. Jamal blinked, as if the letters might vanish if he looked away. But they stayed, bright on the board. His name in the top 10. His name in the final round. His name where no one expected it to be. The storm outside Easton Hall erupted. News outlets posted live updates. Screenshots of the leaderboard circulated on Twitter and Instagram. Westbrook kid just placed top 10. Whole room shook. Remember when they laughed at him in class? He's laughing now. Guarantee they'll try to move the goalposts. Comment sections split like fault lines. Some voices cheered. Proof that talent doesn't ask permission. Others bristled. Watch them spin this into a racism sob story. The competition had become more than math. It had become a stage where America argued itself raw. Inside the hall, the finalists were called forward. Jamal walked with the others, feeling the heat of every eye. The Kingsley boys avoided looking at him. The Meadowbrook girl whispered to her teammate, "He won't survive the lightning round." But her voice cracked just slightly. The finalists took their seats on stage, a row of chairs facing the judges and the audience. The moderator adjusted the microphone. "Congratulations to our top 10. These students will now face the lightning round. Questions will be answered aloud, points tallied in real time. Jamal sat, palms sweating, back straight. The lights above felt harsher than any classroom glare. He looked out into the gallery. Denise met his eyes and mouthed, "You belong here." The lightning round was merciless. Questions snapped fast. Limits, proofs, applied calculus. Students buzzed in, answers firing like bullets. Some stumbled. Others soared. Jamal listened, heart racing, waiting for his chance. When his turn came, he pressed the buzzer. The question rang out. Evaluate the integral. His mind snapped into focus. The substitution appeared in his head like a door swinging open. He answered cleanly, voice steady. The moderator nodded. Correct. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Denise's hands shook. Miss Patel exhaled loudly. Round after round, Jamal held his ground. He wasn't flawless. He missed one, fumbled another, but he stayed in contention. With each correct answer, the room's disbelief turned heavier, more brittle, like glass straining under pressure. When the final tally appeared, Jamal's name glowed in third place. The atrium erupted. Some clapped, some shook their heads. A few muttered accusations of luck. But the scoreboard didn't care. It was final. It was The award ceremony began. Judges rose, adjusting microphones, preparing speeches about excellence and resilience. The audience hushed. The announcer read names in reverse order, calling up finalists to receive medals. When Jamal's name was called for third place, the pause was almost imperceptible. But it was there, a flicker of hesitation, as though the announcer himself hadn't expected to say it aloud. Jamal rose, walked to the stage. The crowd's buzz grew louder, and then the twist landed like thunder. The announcer cleared his throat, presenting the medal for third place. Mr. Chandler, representing Westbrook High. Gasps echoed. Denise froze. Miss Patel's eyes narrowed. On stage, Jamal stopped mid-step. From the side of the room, Chandler emerged, tie straight, expression unreadable. His footsteps were deliberate as he approached the podium. The hall seemed to tilt, the noise collapsing into a single question. Would the man who once made Jamal a joke now be forced to honor him? Chandler, face tight with restraint, takes the medal in hand and turns toward Jamal, an entire auditorium holding its breath for the collision of humiliation and triumph. The medal gleamed under the stage lights, its bronze face catching the glare of the auditorium's chandeliers. Chandler held it in both hands, as though it weighed more than it should, his knuckles whitening around the ribbon. The announcer's voice still hung in the air, presenting the medal for third place. Mr. Chandler, representing Westbrook High. For the audience, it was just a procedural detail. For Jamal, Denise, Miss Patel, and every student who remembered that classroom humiliation, it was a collision years in the making. The man who had once turned Jamal into a punchline was now called to honor him. Jamal stepped forward, each footfall heavy and deliberate, the sound echoing across the hushed hall. The murmurs in the audience thickened. Parents craned their necks. Some students whispered, recognizing the irony. Others reached for their phones, sensing the electricity of a moment that felt bigger than a medal. Denise's hands trembled in her lap. She wanted to scream, to tell the judges what they had done by choosing Chandler, to tear down the stage with her bare hands if she had to. But she stayed seated, nails digging into her palms. Her son didn't need her to fight this battle for him. His silence, she knew, was already heavier than her anger. Chandler turned toward him. His face betrayed the effort of control, his smile too thin, his eyes too flat. It was the look of a man who understood he had been forced into a ritual he could not escape. He extended the medal with a stiffness that read more like surrender than celebration. "Congratulations, Jamal," Chandler said. His voice was smooth, but there was no warmth. Jamal didn't answer. He didn't need to. He bowed his head just enough for the medal to be placed around his neck, then straightened, meeting Chandler's eyes. For a second, the auditorium felt suspended in that silent exchange. Chandler's authority cracked, his arrogance laid bare for hundreds to see, undone by the very student he had tried to diminish. The crowd broke into applause. Some clapped because it was expected. Others clapped harder, sensing the layers of history unfolding before them. A few, students mostly, cheered outright. The sound rolled through the hall, louder than any laughter had ever been. Jamal stepped back, metal resting cold against his chest. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply stood, his silence saying what words could not. "I was never the joke. You." In the gallery, Ms. Patel leaned toward Denise. Do you see it? Denise blinked back tears. See what? He's not even celebrating, Ms. Patel said. He's showing them what dignity looks like. That's harder than solving any equation. Denise nodded. Her throat ached. That's my boy. Chandler walked back to the judge's table, his face tight with restraint. On the surface, he was still composed. But his hands betrayed him, fingers flexing compulsively as he sat. He stared at his notes, though he wasn't reading them. Every movement on stage reminded him that his authority had been punctured in public. The ceremony continued. Second place was announced, then first. Each student walked proudly across the stage, medals awarded without irony, applause rolling evenly, but the hall's attention kept snapping back to Jamal, sitting third from the end, silent, composed, a medal resting against his chest like a verdict. The program ended with the usual speeches. The importance of mathematics, the value of resilience, the promise of young talent. But beneath the platitudes, the energy in the room felt different. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something unscripted, something that could not be buried in polite words. As the audience filed out, whispers turned into open conversations. That was poetic. Did you see Chandler's face? I never thought I'd see a student make him look small. Parents spoke in hushed tones, some praising Jamal's composure, others questioning how he'd been allowed to compete at all. Students scrolled their feeds, posting screenshots of the leaderboard next to Chandler's stiff smile. The irony was too sharp not to share. And among them was a journalist. Her name was Alicia Grant, a freelancer for a regional paper who had come to cover the competition as a routine education story. She had expected the usual elite prep schools dominating, local public schools struggling for scraps. But as she watched Chandler fasten the medal around Jamal's neck, her instincts screamed. She raised her phone, pressed record, and caught the silence, the power of it, the humiliation in Chandler's eyes, the dignity in Jamal's stillness. This isn't just math, Alicia whispered to herself. This is a story. Outside the hall, Denise wrapped her arms around Jamal, holding him tightly for the first time all day. You did it, she whispered into his shoulder. I didn't win first, Jamal said quietly. You won what mattered, she replied. She pulled back, touching the medal gently. And you didn't let them take your dignity. Ms. Patel joined them. Jamal, she said, her voice firm, do you realize what you just did? You forced Chandler to honor you. That's not just a medal, that's history. Jamal glanced down at the ribbon. It doesn't feel like history. It will when they try to rewrite it, Ms. Patel said. And they will, but you've already written it first. Meanwhile, Chandler slipped out a side door, avoiding the throng of parents and students. He needed air, space, anything to recover. In the parking lot, he sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel, until his hands shook. For the first time, he felt the fragility of his reputation. He had always controlled the narrative, the tough teacher, the guardian of standards, the man who demanded excellence. But today the script had been wrested from him by a boy he had underestimated. He checked his phone. Already, notifications pinged. A video clip was spreading. Alicia Grant's recording of the medal moment, posted with the caption, "Teacher forced to honor the student he once mocked." Comments multiplied. Some called it justice. Others called it overblown. But the story was out, alive, beyond his control. Chandler exhaled, the sound ragged. For the first time, he wondered if his authority had been permanently cracked. Back inside, Jamal and Denise moved through the lobby. Students eyed him differently now, not all with respect, but no longer with easy dismissal. Some nodded subtly, others looked away, embarrassed. The shift was small but undeniable. Alicia approached, phone still in her hand. Jamal Rivers? He paused, wary. Yes, I'm Alicia Grant. I'm a journalist. I'd like to talk to you about what just happened. Denise bristled. He's a student, not a headline. I know, Alicia said quickly. But this is bigger than a medal. People need to hear what it took for him to get here. His voice could change things. Jamal studied her. The thought of speaking publicly made his chest tighten. But the thought of silence, of letting others twist the story again, was worse. I'll think about it, he said. That's all I ask, Alicia replied. She slipped him her card. Call me when you're ready. The world's listening now. The car ride home was quiet. Denise drove with one hand, the other resting lightly on Jamal's medal. The headlights carved narrow paths through the night. Jamal stared out the window, the events replaying in his mind. Chandler's face, the applause, the medal's weight. He whispered, almost to himself. Did I prove it? Denise glanced at him. To who? He didn't answer. He wasn't sure. Back in her apartment that night, Alicia uploaded the video to her editor with a short pitch. This isn't about math. It's about dignity, racism, and poetic justice. A black student mocked by his teacher forces the same teacher to award him a medal on stage. The silence says everything. Her editor replied within minutes. Run it. By midnight, the clip had 10,000 views. By dawn, it had 200. And by the time Jamal walked into Westbrook High the next morning, his classmates weren't whispering memes anymore. They were whispering about the video, about the silence, about the look on Chandler's face as he handed over the medal. Unbeknownst to Jamal, Alicia's recording is already going viral, setting the stage for a national conversation that will pull him, his school, and Chandler into a storm none of them can control. By morning, the video was everywhere, not just on small accounts or regional pages, but threaded through timelines, shared in group chats, stitched on TikTok, debated on Twitter, reposted on Facebook with captions like "This says everything" without words. The clip was simple. Chandler, the stern, polished math teacher, awkwardly lowering a medal over Jamal's neck. Jamal standing silent, steady, eyes unwavering, the applause swelling around them. Chandler's tight jaw, his face betraying the humiliation of being forced into an act of respect he had never intended. It was less than 30 seconds long, but it had become a mirror in which everyone saw something different. On Black Twitter, the reaction was swift, furious, celebratory. This is why representation mattered. They laughed at him, and now they're clapping for him. Every black kid in a gifted class knows this story. Threads unfolded with thousands of comments from people recounting their own experiences, teachers who doubted them, counselors who steered them away from AP classes, moments where silence had to substitute for dignity. Jamal's name became shorthand for resilience in the face of systemic bias. At the same time, backlash surged. Conservative pundits called it manufactured outrage. Anonymous accounts flooded the replies. Maybe the teacher just wanted to push him. Y'all turn everything into racism. Third place isn't a victory, it's a participation medal. The storm swelled, each side louder, neither willing to let the clip fade. At Westbrook High, the effect was immediate. Students scrolled on their phones between classes, replaying the moment, whispering about Jamal's sudden fame. Some approached him with cautious respect. Yo man, that was powerful, one said, voice low as though afraid of being overheard. Others couldn't hide their bitterness. Congrats on being a victim celebrity, a Ridgeview transfer sneered. Even teachers behaved differently. Some offered polite nods in the hallway, a quiet acknowledgement they had once denied. Others avoided him altogether, eyes sliding past as if contact might implicate them. Jamal moved through it all silently. The attention felt unreal, like standing in the center of a storm with winds pulling in every direction. He didn't ask for any of it. He had only wanted to solve a problem. At home, Denise saw the storm up close. Her phone buzzed nonstop with messages. Old friends texted congratulations. Strangers filled her inbox with both support and venom. She scrolled through one message from a woman in Chicago. Thank you for raising a son who carries himself with dignity. My boy saw the video and said, "That's me, Mom. You don't know us, but we're grateful." And then, seconds later, another from an anonymous account. Keep your kid out of spaces he doesn't belong. You people ruin everything. Denise threw the phone onto the couch. Her hands shook. She looked at Jamal, sitting at the kitchen table, with his math notebook open, trying to cling to normalcy. Baby, she said softly, are you ready for this? Because it's already bigger than us. Jamal didn't look up. I didn't choose it, he murmured. It chose me. In the neighborhood, the reaction was louder. Mrs. Alvarez stopped Denise in the stairwell, pressing both hands around hers. He gave us pride, she said, eyes wet. The whole block is talking. At the corner store, Mr. Yusuf nodded solemnly at Jamal. When you walked off that stage, you carried all of us. But not everyone was proud. A man Denise had served at the diner leaned against his truck outside and muttered, "Some people will do anything for attention, just loud enough for them to hear." Jamal kept walking, but Denise's face burned. The local paper ran the story first. From joke to justice, Westbrook teen forces reckoning at state competition. The article quoted anonymous students praising Jamal's persistence, describing Chandler's reputation for harshness. It also quoted parents who insisted Chandler had simply demanded excellence. Then the regional outlets picked it up. The clip appeared on evening news broadcasts with headlines split neatly between triumph and controversy. One anchor asked, "Is this a story of resilience, or a manufactured moment of outrage?" Another countered, "Why is it so hard to accept that racism still exists in our classrooms?" The debate itself became the story. At school, Jamal couldn't escape it. By lunch, reporters waited outside the gates. Cameras poised, students crowded windows for glimpses of the scene. Principal Hayes released a statement to the press. "Westbrook High is proud of all our students' achievements. While the viral video has drawn attention, we ask that the community remember the importance of context and fairness in evaluating educators and students alike." It was a careful sentence, too careful. To some it sounded like pride. To others like denial. When Jamal read it on his phone, he pushed the screen away. "Fairness," he muttered. "That's the word they use when they don't want to say truth." Miss Patel heard him. "Then don't let them own the words," she said gently. "Make your own." The unexpected twist came 2 days later. A former student of Chandler's, now in college, tweeted, "Not surprised. He humiliated me too. Said girls don't think fast enough for real math. I dropped the class." The tweet went viral. More stories followed. Students describing years of rigor that felt more like cruelty, microaggressions, wrapped in authority. By the weekend, Chandler's name trended online. Petitions circulated, some demanding his resignation, others defending him as a victim of cancel culture. The school board released a statement promising a review. Chandler himself stayed silent. His silence read both as guilt and as calculated defiance. Jamal sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the chaos. His medal lay in front of him, heavy and silent. "Why are they making it about him again?" he asked Denise, frustration breaking through. "I'm the one who did the work, but it's like I'm just the background in his story now." Denise cupped his cheek. "Because that's how they keep control. They shift the spotlight back to themselves. But the truth, baby, you are the story. You're the reason the world is talking. Don't forget that." He swallowed hard. "I don't feel like the story. I just feel tired." She kissed his forehead. "That means you're human, not a headline. Don't let them steal that from you." By Sunday night, the clip had been viewed over 5 million times. Celebrities tweeted it. Activists shared it. Education experts debated it on podcasts. A senator even weighed in. "This young man's experience reflects the barriers too many students of color still face. We must do better." The attention felt unreal, as though the world had placed Jamal in the center of a conversation he never asked to lead. Yet everywhere he turned, his phone, the television, the murmurs on the street, it followed him. Then came the email. It arrived in Denise's inbox at 9:14 p.m. Subject line crisp. Interview request. National Network News. The message was polite, but urgent. "We would like to feature Jamal and his mother in an exclusive interview about the recent events. We believe this story is of national importance. Please respond at your earliest convenience." Denise read it twice, then handed the phone to Jamal. His eyes widened, the words blurring into weight. "They want us on national TV," he whispered. Jamal and Denise stare at the email in stunned silence, knowing that if they say yes, their private pain and triumph will be thrust onto the biggest stage in the country. The email from the national network sat unread on Denise's phone the next morning, as if answering it would open a door she wasn't sure she wanted to walk through. She tucked it away in her purse, determined to breathe before making a decision. But outside, Westbrook was already shifting. By Monday, the school felt like a different building. The viral clip hadn't just embarrassed Chandler. It had ignited a conversation too large to put back in its box. Posters appeared on lockers. "Respect is a standard." Someone spray-painted the words on the back wall of the gym before janitors scrubbed it away. Students organized a study circle in the cafeteria, inviting everyone regardless of track. Jamal's name was whispered, not as a joke this time, but as a symbol. In the courtyard, Trent, the same boy who had once laughed the loudest at Chandler's joke, approached Jamal awkwardly. "Yo man, I was wrong," he muttered. What I did, that was trash. Sorry." Jamal studied him for a long second before nodding once. "Okay," he said. "Not forgiveness, not yet. But acknowledgement." Behind them, Ava and Priya were already collecting signatures for a petition demanding transparent sponsorship criteria for academic competitions. Within hours, hundreds had signed. The parents moved next. PTA meetings, once focused on bake sales and field trips, became battlegrounds. Denise attended one, sitting quietly until the discussion turned to Chandler. A wealthy parent defended him, insisting he was a rigorous teacher unfairly maligned by the internet. Another mother snapped back. Rigor doesn't mean humiliation. My daughter dropped calculus because of him. She said he made her feel small on purpose. The room erupted, voices layered over each other, some demanding accountability, others clinging to tradition. Denise listened, her pulse racing. She didn't speak, not yet, but she felt the tide turning. By the next week, the school board inbox was flooded with letters from parents, alumni, even strangers across the state. Some demanded Chandler's resignation, others demanded systemic change, new equity policies, oversight committees, mentorship programs for underrepresented students. For the first time in years, the administration couldn't hide behind silence. Principal Hayes felt it like pressure building in his office walls. Emails stacked in his inbox, voicemails filled with frustration, board members demanding updates. He reread his carefully crafted statement, context and fairness, and knew it no longer sufficed. The story had outgrown his diplomacy. He walked the hallways, seeing it in students' eyes. Jamal had become more than a classmate. He was a symbol of every slight, every moment of quiet dismissal they had swallowed. Hayes thought about the letter signed wetness, about his own warning to Jamal to avoid unnecessary attention. The phrase haunted him now, hollow and cowardly. Still, reputation was the currency he had lived on. And reputation now demanded sacrifice. The board called a public forum. Insisting on transparency, Hayes was told to appear, to answer questions, to face the community. He didn't sleep that night. Jamal, meanwhile, felt the shift in quieter ways. In the library, Mrs. Ray whispered, "Proud of you, sweetheart," as she slid him a stack of practice problems. In the diner where Denise worked, regulars left larger tips, scribbling notes on napkins. For Jamal, "Keep going." Even strangers on the street nodded as they passed. But with the warmth came the shadows. A crumpled note in his locker, "Enjoy your 15 minutes." An email to Denise with no sender. "Pull your kid out before he ruins this town school." The backlash hadn't vanished. It had simply gone underground. At night, Jamal sat at his desk, staring at the metal. It gleamed in the lamplight, beautiful and heavy. "I don't know if I can carry what they've made me," he admitted to Denise. "You're not carrying it alone," she said. She placed the old pin from her own youth beside his medal. "This is ours, Jamal. All of ours. Let them think it's just you. They don't see the village behind you." The unexpected twist came when Chandler himself broke silence. An email leaked to the local press. His letter to the board. In it, he claimed he had been misrepresented by out-of-context clips. He framed himself as a rigorous teacher targeted by online mobs, warning that capitulating to public pressure will weaken academic integrity. The article spread quickly. Some parents rallied to him. Others were enraged. The divide grew sharper. But for Denise, the letter was the final straw. She had kept her voice measured, her anger private, trusting that others would see the truth. But Chandler's attempt to rewrite the narrative cut too deep. When the board announced the public forum, Denise knew she would no longer stay silent. The night of the meeting, the auditorium was packed. Parents, students, teachers, reporters, all crammed into rows, the air heavy with anticipation. TV cameras lined the back wall. Hayes sat at the center table, palms damp, notes trembling in his hands. He began with careful words, his voice steady but strained. "We are here tonight because our community has questions about standards, equity, and accountability. Westbrook remains committed to both excellence and fairness." The crowd cut him off. "What about Jamal?" someone shouted. "What about the humiliation he faced?" Another voice rose. "What about the other kids who left calculus because of Chandler?" Hayes swallowed. His answers sounded thinner with every question. "We are reviewing policies." "Policies won't change culture," a parent snapped. The noise swelled. Hayes glanced at the board members, their faces blank with calculation. He realized then what Denise had already decided. The story no longer belonged to him. From the back row, Denise stood. She hadn't planned her words. She didn't need to. She stepped to the microphone, her voice trembling at first, but growing stronger with every syllable. "My son," she began, "was made into a joke in front of his class. Not because of his work, because of who he is. That humiliation didn't stay in that room. It followed him in whispers, in memes, in the way people looked at him. And when he stood back up, when he dared to prove himself, they tried to shut him down again. The room fell quiet. You call it rigor. You call it standards. But I call it cruelty, dressed as discipline. I call it a system that says to black children, we'll celebrate your talent only after we've tried to bury it. She paused, her voice thick with emotion. And my son? He still stood. He still solved. He still showed the world who he is. That medal isn't just his. It's a reminder that dignity can't be taken by people who never gave it in the first place. Applause erupted. Students rose to their feet. Parents clapped hard, some through tears. The sound was overwhelming, louder than any speech Hayes had rehearsed, louder than any policy could contain. Hayes sat frozen, his notes useless, his reputation cracking under the truth spoken plainly into the microphone. As the applause thundered, a board member leaned toward Hayes and whispered, "It's over. You'll have to decide between Chandler or the community." The applause from the community meeting still rang in Denise's ears long after she left the podium. It had not only rattled the walls of Westbrook High's auditorium, it had cracked open something deeper: fear, silence, complicity. For the first time, the school could not tuck its ugliness into the margins. The community had spoken, and Jamal's story was the reason. But a reckoning always leaves scars. Spring stretched into summer, and Jamal carried his medal home, not as a trophy but as a question. He finished his senior year with grades that silenced any lingering whispers about luck. Colleges called, scholarships arrived, yet he felt the weight of expectation differently now. It was no longer about whether he belonged, but whether he could bear being the symbol so many had made him. Denise tried to anchor him. "You're not their savior," she reminded him over late-night meals. "You're my son. Don't let the world take that from you." But Jamal had already begun to think bigger than himself. Every time he walked through the halls of Westbrook, students stopped him, quietly, sometimes nervously, to say, "Because of you I signed up for AP," or "Because of you I'm not quitting." He realized his fight had become more than personal survival. It had planted seeds. For Chandler, the fallout was harsher. The board's deliberations dragged for weeks. But the tide was unstoppable. Parents no longer defended him with the same vigor. Students posted more stories, memories of slights, sarcasm, humiliation disguised as teaching. His defenders shrank in number. His allies in administration grew silent. By May, Chandler resigned. The statement he submitted was curt: "I am stepping down to allow the school to move forward." But everyone knew his career was no longer remembered for decades of scores or accolades. It was remembered for 30 seconds of video, the moment arrogance collided with consequence. Hayes, though spared resignation, never regained his footing. His careful words had been exposed for what they were: a shield against accountability. He remained principal, but his authority dimmed, his reputation stained. Students no longer feared him. Parents no longer trusted him. His silence had cost him his credibility. Through it all, Jamal kept working. Not because of Chandler, not because of the board, but because Dr. Ellis would not let him stop. "Don't let the medal be the end of your work," Ellis said one afternoon in the library, sliding another problem set across the table. "That's how they trap you. Celebrate you once and then wait for you to stumble. Prove that the medal was just the beginning." Jamal grinned. "You're relentless." Ellis chuckled. "I'm old enough to know relentlessness is the only way forward." Their sessions became less about test prep and more about vision. Ellis told him stories of black mathematicians erased from textbooks, of students who had brilliance but no mentor, of rooms that still tried to measure worth in stereotypes. Together they began sketching something new: a mentorship program for black students in STEM, a space where no student would ever again feel like the joke. By graduation, the idea had grown roots. Jamal and Ellis met with local leaders, secured donations, and recruited volunteers. Denise helped organize the first fundraiser, baking until her hands ached. Miss Patel offered the library as a meeting place. Even Miss Alvarez contributed, bringing her old notebooks and telling Jamal, "Pass them down. Let the next kid mark them with their own mistakes." When Jamal walked across the stage at Westbrook's graduation ceremony, the auditorium erupted in applause that was no longer tinged with irony. He accepted his diploma with honors, his medal gleaming under the lights. Chandler was absent, his chair empty. Hayes clapped mechanically, but the students' cheers drowned him out. Afterward, a group of underclassmen crowded around Jamal. One boy, barely a freshman, looked up at him with wide eyes. They said I wasn't smart enough for honors. He confessed quietly. But I'm still gonna try. Because you did. Jamal placed a hand on his shoulder. Don't try because I did. Try because you can. The mentorship program launched that fall. They called it the Proof Initiative. Its motto was simple. Your talent is the answer. Don't let anyone erase the equation. Jamal and Ellis led the first session. Dozens of students filled the library. Some shy, some eager, all carrying invisible weights. Jamal spoke to them, not as a prodigy, not as a headline, but as someone who understood the sting of dismissal. They laughed at me once, he said, his voice steady. They thought I was a joke. But the truth is, math doesn't care about skin. Knowledge doesn't ask for permission, and talent knows no color. The room went silent, then filled with nods. Ellis stepped forward, beaming. That, he said, is what I wanted to hear from him all along. Years later, when people looked back, they didn't remember Chandler's resignation letter or Hayes's weak statements. They remembered the seed that had been planted in the ashes of humiliation. They remembered Jamal turning his scars into structure, his pain into policy. They remembered how Westbrook itself began to change. New training for teachers, new pathways for underrepresented students, new voices rising where silence once suffocated. The boy who was once mocked became a mentor. The cruel joke became a legacy. One evening, long after graduation, Jamal returned to Westbrook with Ellis. The school had invited him back to speak to current students, many of whom had only heard the story through whispers and viral clips. He stood in the same classroom where Chandler had once humiliated him. The chalkboard loomed, still scarred by years of equations. For a moment, Jamal froze, memory pressing hard. He saw his younger self walking to the board under the weight of laughter. He heard Chandler's smirk, disguised as a voice. He felt the silence that cut deeper than words. But then he remembered the medal, the mentorship program, the students who now believed, because he had refused to break. He picked up a piece of chalk. Math is supposed to reveal truth, he said to the class. That day, the truth wasn't about the problem on the board. It was about what they thought of me. But here's the thing. Truth doesn't stop just because someone doesn't believe in it. And neither should you. He turned back to the board, and with steady hand, wrote his name. Beneath it, he added one sentence. Talent knows no color. The room went quiet, students absorbing the weight of it. Ellis, standing at the back, smiled, eyes glistening. Denise, watching from the doorway, covered her mouth with her hand, tears slipping free. Jamal set the chalk down. That's the only proof I ever needed, he said softly. And for the first time, the board that once mocked him became the canvas of his legacy. The same chalkboard where Jamal was once humiliated now bore his signature, a permanent reminder that possibility cannot be mocked out of existence. His silence had once spoken louder than words. Now his words carried louder than silence. No child should have to fight twice, once to learn, and again just to be seen as worthy. If Jamal's courage moved you, let the world know his struggle matters. Type yes if you believe in justice, and subscribe if this broke your